I was like, hey, there's code in the wall. And she goes, I don't understand what you mean. Straight up, like in the Matrix, self-executing code of some sort. Like, it really jarred me. This is a simulation no matter what. So you can't get out of the fact that it's a simulation. So even if you think that it's just a physical world, right? Your brain is already buffering something that isn't what that is. That's a simulation. In one of the instances, they actually showed me, they stripped everything to the grid, and then they showed me how they reconstruct everything. And with beyond the shadow of a doubt, they said, yes, that is correct.
It is a simulation.
Oh, yeah. It's not like you're in prison. It's not like where they are is the real world, and then you are in a computational world. The computational world is the real world. What we got used to over here is a tiny subset. It's a slice of this larger reality.
And to ask you an impossible question before we get too far away from it, who do you think that they is?
There's different beings on different levels. The ones responsible for our universe are these.
Welcome to the Mind Meld, Danny.
Thank you so much for having me, Michael. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I've been aware of you for a while. You've come up in numerous conversations. We were just talking about that a little bit before we started recording, and I've always thought what you were doing was interesting. And then our mutual friend Adam Curry, who's also one of the most fascinating people I've ever met, like he just keeps revealing layers of like things he's interested in, things he's involved in, people he knows that I'm just like, holy shit, man! Like, what agency do you work for? Let's get serious here. What percentage of a hybrid DNA? I'm half joking. But
he's a. I don't mean to break your stride.
Yeah.
He gifted when we were leaving California. He came. And he gifted me something, and I've only known him at that point maybe for a few months. He gifted me a picture. When we're done, I can show you the picture. I was like, dude, that's some deep understanding right there of like who I am, and like that's pretty amazing.
Whoa.
Yeah.
So how did you connect with him, and what's the picture of?
I mean, I can show you the picture.
Sure.
It's so I think Paul Hynek connected us.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Paul, I was connected to him with through a friend of mine, Kirsten, and she knew him. I actually don't know how she knows him, but she connected us, and then we spoke, and we really hit it off. And Paul is one of the coolest people on the planet.
Yeah.
He invited us for dinner. We had, obviously we had some fun and
partook.
And partook. And then, he also came to one of our shoots in the movie, and I can show you the picture. It's kind of interesting.
Sure. Oh, wow. So I got to tell you something now that I'm seeing this. When I was at Monroe Institute, I did a retreat there, the whole gate. I'm assuming you're familiar with the gateway thing to some degree.
Yeah, I've done it. Yep.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Yeah.
So then you're going to know this better than most people, but I'm going to explain a little bit just for the audience's benefit. You do a sort of internal, I guess, warm up or ritual when you're first starting the meditation. Like it always starts with ocean sounds, and then you do this thing called the energy conversion box, et cetera, et cetera. So I would do that, but I would always imagine myself for some reason when I'd open before closing the box, and putting my baggage, so to speak, in the box, I would always imagine putting a robe on for some reason. And then after putting the robe on, I would like walk, or sometimes I'd float down the beach, and I'd always come to like sort of a small building. Not exactly like that, but sort of like that. And it would be sort of like the place I would go. And I would also mentally go in there and meditate. And then sometimes that would start interesting things. So right away when I saw that little shelter, that's the first thing I thought of.
Well, it's a teepee. I don't know if you saw, but there's like little eyes inside of it.
Yeah.
It's like something is happening there. But also my YouTube channel has the graphic at the top is an astronaut walking with a guitar. And it also kind of reminds me a little bit of Midnight Gospel.
Oh yeah.
That that he lives in this teepee, this little house. Anyways, I thought it was, there's a lot there, and it's in the desert, and
that's awesome.
Yeah.
He's such a kind, tuned in soul. But anyway, man, how did this all start for you? Like I generally know the genesis of the laser experiment, and some of the high weirdness you started to experience where you started to really question reality. You started having entity encounters. You started, et cetera, et cetera. But prior to all of that, have you always been sort of like a seeker, or did all of this really just get catalyzed um, through DMT and all this other stuff?
Yeah, no, I was always a seeker. I since I was a little kid, it was more from the physics side. My grandfather was a physicist, and he
Mm,
was talking to me about all these things when I was a little kid, and my interest in physics really spiked when I was in school, and then I went through this program, started going through this program where I lived in Israel back then, and I was supposed they have something in the University of Tel Aviv where you basically get you can enter kids into this program where they start courses in the university. And in the beginning, it's more like introductory courses and things like this, obviously catered to also keep young minds a little bit more interested than, than more adult people. But then within a couple of years, you basically can move to an official program in the university, and then by the time you finish high school, and then you get your master's during the army, then you can just you get out and you already have like you working towards your PhD basically.
okay.
And I started doing that, uh, and then I made some different life choices. I was a pretty wild kid, but the interest in the margins of reality was always like I was born with it. I
Mm,
remember when I was since I can recall myself. I remember I was standing in the kitchen. I think I was 5 or something, and I was just looking at the floor, and I was like, "Wait, why me? Like, what is me? Like, what is this versus somebody else?" Right. So that it just already started playing itself in my head, and my default mode is that. Like, if
mhm.
I sit on the couch and there's nothing to do, my brain goes, "What's outside the universe?" Just
Right, right,
automatically. It's just
yeah,
what it does. And then I, I discovered psychedelics pretty early as well. I always wanted, just like find something crazy, and I never really wanted, like, I wanted to be abducted by aliens, like that kind of stuff. By the time I got to my 20s, I've already done all the, let's just, just do whatever and go crazy and all of that stuff. So it's almost like there was a slightly more mature attitude towards these
yeah,
things pretty early on. And then I all of a sudden realized that even without me really putting any attention on it, I had debilitating OCD when I was a kid.
mm,
Not like cute OCD where you have things to be aligned, like opening the doors a million times before you leave the house. If you do it wrong, you have to do it all over again. So like really like crazy stuff.
yeah,
And and I realized all of a sudden it was gone. And I was like gone, like it doesn't exist. And then I started retracing my steps, and I realized that it was mushrooms because I was doing copious amounts of mushrooms, and something about that smoothened whatever was stuck in the machinery, and I could retrace it. I was like, oh. And then I
yeah,
started looking at it more from like the perspective of aiming versus just kind of going wild. And the second I started doing that, I really kind of started developing this more serious relationship with it. And you know how it is. Like you voiced to me before that you're more of the idealistic perspective, and I fully
yeah,
agree. And I actually think that if you think about it from a technical standpoint, you had Bernardo Kastrup here, which I think is
yeah,
one of the gifts to the world at this point. So I do think that if you think about it a little bit more technically, it actually makes perfect sense why everything is not pre-written, but it's just internal agreement. So like if the larger bubbles of consciousness operate on this level, and you the bubble that you are operates on that level, and there's some coherence between the functions, right? So
yes,
when things happen right on time, it's not that surprising because it's kind of levels of emergence talking to each other basically. So right on time, I was dating this girl. I lived in Indianapolis back then, and she gifted me A New Earth. So not The Power of Now, not his first book of Eckhart Tolle, but the second
yeah,
one. And I took it as an insult because for me, all that stuff was just for weak people, stupid people, people who can't handle reality. That was my attitude, right? I was kind of very materialistic in my approach. Definitely not religious. I wasn't really militant against religion, but I definitely enjoyed when somebody
yeah,
kind of elbowed religion here and there, right? So then but I kept it. So I was like, a gift. And one fateful night, I had a pretty kind of like dark night of the soul, and it was almost like scripted, and there was this the room was completely dark. I was sitting there. I suffered from depression, pretty severe depression, and it was like coming and going, and it was for years. And the nightstand was illuminating the book, almost like all you missed it was the tune, like, oh, like just like
Hmm.
that. So I picked up the book, started reading a few pages, and it made so much sense so quickly. It just went down like fine wine. It was so easy to consume, and I was like, oh, this is what it's about. Oh my god, it makes so much sense. Like, and then I found Terrence McKenna. I
Yeah.
started listening to these things a little bit more, from that point of view of like
Right.
actual, really asking, what is it? What's going on here? And way down the line, I discovered meditation, started doing that proper. But that was the birth of my, I guess, when my analytical mind connected to the fact that there's something greater going on, and it's not a metaphor.
Yeah.
That was I would say that night was actually the birth of that.
Mm. Yeah, man, I have such an similar curvature to my thinking where you sort of just have the exoteric mainstream religions that are around you as a kid, and then you start thinking critically about the picture these are things are painting. Just they don't make this doesn't make sense. I don't see a world in which this kind of a belief system makes sense. And you have all of the natural philosophical objections about, like, how could a god like that allow a world like this or make a world like this? This just doesn't comport. And then same, I became very atheistic, very dismissive. Then I went for me it wasn't a singular moment, but it was encountering a lot of the thinkers that you just mentioned. And even, going through like a philosophy 101 class and like reading Descartes, right? Descartes is supposed to be this, like, he's like considered to be the father of, like, you know scientific theory in a lot of ways, like materialist reductionist ways of measuring reality. And then you are reading the stories about like how he came to these conclusions. He was having visions of angelic figures, and he was doing these thought experiments about, like, the what's the famous demon one, like how, like,
Oh, well,
it's,
that was Laplace. Laplace's demon.
well, the Laplace's demon is a different thing, but
Okay, yeah.
there's another thing. I'm forgetting the, but yeah. Anyway, you just realize that there's a lot of very nuanced thinkers on a variety of metaphysical ideas. And then I really started resonating with people like Ram Dass and, like you said, Terrence McKenna, Robert Anton Wilson, thinkers like that. And then you start to realize, like, oh, there's this whole esoteric, philosophical, first person left hand path. And I don't mean left hand path in a demonic way. I mean left hand path and like a, you explore for yourself, you find out for yourself, you encounter the mysterium tremendum for yourself, and then you decide. And then you circle back to some of these other esoteric traditions, and you're like, holy shit, they were on the right track. And now we have like sort of new lenses and new ways to look at things through the prism of things, like psychoactive molecules, and through, just concepts that the ancients wouldn't have had access to. Like, I'm sure we're going to get into simulation ideas today. That's not exactly, they talked about simulation adjacent things, but computers didn't exist, right? That wasn't a lens that they could view this through. So we just have this new, I don't know, mutation sounds kind of like a negative word, but new
Why?
new riffs.
X-Men.
Yeah,
They
new
were.
new riffs with new instruments on the same song, I think, is maybe a good way to put it, or something. And I think you're doing that, man. You're doing that in such an interesting way.
I
Not in a way
appreciate it.
that's like free from controversy, of course, but like, it's, how could it be free from controversy, right? Like,
Cannot possibly
yeah.
be. Yeah.
So I resonate with you so much on that disposition. Then what happens? Where does your story go?
Oh, there's just like, the real hero's journey is just mostly mundanity,
Right.
you know, punctuated here and there by some interesting moments. But the truth is that, and by the way, just to not to make too deep of a point out of it, but the reason that I, whenever somebody comes to my stream, to my live,
Hmm.
whenever they like, basically, I always recommend people to do a Vipassana retreat, because one of the things that I found from all the stuff that I was ever exposed to is that it is the thing that allows you to fall in love with the mundane.
Mm.
And that's what the majority of your life is. And actually, until I found that, it was kind of boring most of the time. So to your question, like what happens next?
Yeah.
Not much. It's just, it's just like regular life, and you just try to figure things out. And here and there you do, some psychedelics, you do this, you do that. But not much worth mentioning for quite a while. The inciting incident that led to me doing this thing nowadays is, I think it was 2016 or 17, I think. First of all, I heard of DMT actually from Joe Rogan for the first time, and it was before he had the show or anything like this. It was like, I think it was like 2007 maybe,
Yeah, this goes back. He was in the DMT, the Spirit Molecule
yeah, yeah.
documentary. Yeah.
There was a one, you probably heard it. It's like a rant that he did on a radio show in Ohio,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it's like this crazy rant, and I will never forget this because these words burned themselves onto my brain. He said, it doesn't feel like you're in another dimension. You are in another dimension.
Yeah.
And I knew exactly what he means. Now, I've never experienced DMT until that point, but I was like, okay, I know exactly what continuum he's talking about. What is that thing that actually puts it over the top? That is like, you truly are, like, that's it. Like, there's no more questions. You know you're there. And I tried to extract it. I tried to, like, it didn't work. I went to this greenhouse, tried to get some Mimosa Stilis, tried to do it myself. Didn't really, I mean, I distilled something, but it didn't really work. Only when I got to California, I finally found like real DMT, and I tried it. And obviously, and by the way, it didn't work for me for like 10 full times. Like, it just nothing would happen. And eventually it happened, and I immediately was hooked. I was like, holy, like, oh, the same reason everybody gets hooked on it, right? It's like, this is crazy. And then because I was so experienced with psychedelics from before, and for some reason, I can't take credit for this, it's just how my mind is constructed, I love crazy. So because of that, I could easily go as far as you want to go. My brain just built for that, right? And because I was so, it's relevant. I'm not just boasting. The reason that what happened to me on that night that changed everything was so outstanding is because I know that I can go to infinity and beyond, and I love it. Like, let me keep going. And yet, because I also kind of understood the repertoire of what's possible, even though, yeah, DMT is kind of like infinite in scope, but there's a gestalt, there's a thing there that is kind of there's a note that you recognize. And so I had a lot of experience with all these things and with DMT and everything. And all of a sudden, one night, I come back from actually a meditation retreat, and I smoke a bunch of it, and nothing happened. I smoked close to a gram. Like, I poured close to a gram on the plate and just torched it. And then 45 minutes later, I realized nothing happened. Now, it's possible that it was a complete whiteout and I just don't even remember, and I just kept on sitting there. Right? That's possible. But as far as I can tell, it wasn't that. It was just kind of nothing happened, which is pharmacologically impossible. And I sat up when I realized this, and I looked around the room, and then I had a thought. And the thought was something that Terence McKenna said in one of his talks, which is that it's not a drug, it's an alien disguising as a drug. And at that instance, just that thought alone arranged something in my brain that basically took the proposition seriously. So until that moment, it was like, well, that's a cool idea. But for some reason, the propositional machinery of my brain brought it to reality. It was like, that's what's going on. And I said, wait. And the second I had that thought, the whole room flashed white. Everything just went, and I heard whispers all over the room. It wasn't
Wow.
English, but I understood the meaning. It was like, he's paying attention. What do we say? I was like, and now that I'm like telling the story so many times, he was kind of like an amphibian, frog, lizard man, appeared on my right, as real as you. And because I know what's possible on the substance, and because I've done it so much, so deeply, all of that stuff, that is not on the map. That kind of realism where there's just a straight up person standing next to me, nothing else happening. No crazy visuals, no nothing. Just a person that looks like a lizard frog standing next to me, as tangible as a human. And I mean, not froze out of fear, but froze out of awe. I just couldn't
Yeah.
believe what was happening.
Yeah.
And then he pointed to the guitar in the bottom of the room, and the other side of the room, and I immediately thought, oh, he's trying to communicate to like music theory, whatever. I'm not a musician. I'm just practicing. He's like go. I was like, okay. So I get up, pick up the guitar, sit down, and he disappears from one side of the room and appears right next to me, just like that. And then he puts his frog fingers like on the thing, and I'm like, I'm trying to follow, but I'm also obviously all out of it. And I start noticing what he's doing, and I'm putting my fingers, and I'm strumming, and a chord comes out. And then he goes, okay, like this. No, let's like do this. And then I go to the next one, and another chord comes out, and it makes sense. And I go, and he's like, you understand? You don't know how to do this. I'm giving you real information. I'm real. And at that moment, I was like, nothing will ever be the same. I was like,
That's wild,
oh
man.
my God.
Yeah.
Like, this is real. He's like, And I go, and then the part of the story is a little funny. I had a postdoc in physics in the other room because I was renting out the other room for Airbnb. Marco, I will never forget because I exclaimed his name. It was like 2 a.m. And I was like, Marco. He didn't wake up, luckily. I'm going to tell him. A frog from another dimension taught me how to play the guitar. But he basically...
Dude, that should be the name of your book if you ever write a book. Just call it that. That'd be a great name.
People, after I told this, I haven't told the story in a while. I used to tell it a lot, and I haven't told it in a while. And after I told it on one podcast, this little frog guy became like a hero. People were like, he was the main attention. Like everybody wanted to know about him. He never appeared again, by the way.
Wow.
But that fact that I know that I don't know how to do this, and he gives me that information, that was the most brilliant way. So he's like, everything just changed in my brain immediately. And then I started doing it every day. I started smoking DMT every single day, all day. So I was on DMT for over a year. Smoked it all day long in the gym, in the store.
And we should say here, because a lot of people in the comments, I can just already see this person being like, you're addicted to a drug, you're a drug addict.
Sure.
But we should point out that this is stemming from like an intellectual and philosophical and spiritual interest. This isn't like a substance you need, like you're addicted to it, like nicotine. This is like you are actively, intellectually and philosophically and with your entire being exploring a mental space that you otherwise cannot access. So it's like a different it's not that kind of a like addiction or that kind of a
no
physiological
and
thing.
And it's gonna sound super elitist, but it is true. And this is a point that Terence McKenna used to make, which is your level of intellect will determine how much you can pull out of it.
Yeah,
it's just how it is. He used to say some people come out and they say the colors. He said, forget the colors, malarkey, a word that he was very fond of. He said those are three-dimensional scenarios, and the important part isn't what you're seeing, but what it tells you about reality. The fact that it is possible to construct something that complex and coherent on its own right with its own rules of operation. If you don't understand that that's substantial, that you don't have the capacity to. And it's not so much that the importance in being able to do that, to discern that, but to all the people, the naysayers that think that this is just like you said, like it's a form of an addiction. Well, it's more, if you want to say addicted to curiosity, then yes, you're right. But the fact that you just discovered a portal to another dimension, you're not going to do it every day? I don't know what's wrong with you then. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's the other way for me. But basically the weird part that from that point on, the DMT behaved differently. It was no longer what I was familiar with. Once in a while, I would be kind of torpedoed into this like hyperspace. But for the most part, no matter how much I would smoke, everything would come to my room. I would be fully standing, operating, and it was just like augmented reality. And it was like a phone call. Like they would come to my room and they would pick up from where we stopped and they would explain things to me and show me this and show me that. And it was like, and it was as real as you right now.
Yeah. Do pardon the interloping, my friends. Can one interlope upon themselves? that is a brain tingler that we will save for another transmission. You may have noticed that I have shortened my introductions, yet tickling the algorithm, stimulating it in all ways does remain of the utmost importance. So please do like, subscribe, comment, share. I am trying to hit 200K subs at least before the end of the year. Also, we do have an ever swelling library of member only / patron only content, both on the YouTube members page and at patreon.com / third eye drops. If you do join via the latter, you'll also get access to a patron only Discord server and access to live mind melds with myself, occasional special guests, along with, of course, a number of other seekers just like yourself. I do hope to commune with you there, but in the meantime, back to the mind meld. Well, let's just take a moment to pause here because, speaking of hyperspace, I don't know if my McKenna's hitting today, but I do want to just take a moment to linger on entities, encounters, and I wanted to just throw you something with this frog entity in particular. Have you ever heard of the Egyptian god Bes?
The only encounter, please continue explaining to me, but the only thing I've encountered ever that matched what I heard somebody else say what he was, there was this lady on the podcast talking about, she was, I guess, an expert in all these beings, and she explained that there are these frog-like looking beings that are kind of like working with source energy from the 15th dimension. The way she was describing them, and by the way, she said they really don't like to be called frogs. I don't know. But that's the only other encounter I've ever had with what I think it might be, but go ahead.
So I bring this up because I don't remember. I think maybe it was a podcast I heard this on. And now that I'm looking Bes up, he looks less frog-like. But there's some Egyptian temple where this being just looks so unlike anything that I would associate with being like an Egyptian god. And when you look it up, it looks more like this dwarf guy. But I've also seen this depiction of him where he's like a different color and he looks extremely frog-like. So it might, what's going to come up on just your initial Google search doesn't look super frog-like, but I know I've seen some picture of him in this temple where he looks very frog-like. And it's just one of those things that's so if you were going to just make the argument that these beings are sort of like archetypal or they're, coming out of some imaginative artistic act, that's not what you would construct a god to look like. Like that looks like a chubby little dude, or like in another, iteration, some frog-like thing. Unless I'm getting this confused with something else. I'm pretty sure it was Bes though. But anyway, what is your position on the ontological status of these beings? Because this is just such an interesting topic, such a topic, that listeners I know are endlessly fascinated by, is not just simply are these entities real or not real, but their appearances. Like what is this appearance truly what the entity is? Is it something about the way the entity is interacting with your own cognitive apparatus that causes it to appear that way? Or is there really a frog being, or not, whatever they like to be called, dimension where these things exist? Like, I'm sure Gallimore, for instance, gravitates toward this idea that yes, there is something there, but the way it appears to the individual mind is probably going to vary. Like he told me, I did this little Entity Encounters documentary where he essentially says, I don't believe these are lizard beings, that it exists in like a lizard realm or planet somewhere. I believe that there's something about the way the human mind interacts with this being that causes it to meet it halfway as that. What is your take on this?
So obviously the first thing to say is that I have no idea, but if I have to guess, I do think that it's not a black or white story. So everything has its own essence of what it really is, and then there's the perception of what it really is.
Yeah.
So even under the idealistic perspective, and to my mind, it's a misunderstanding of the idealistic perspective, but of course I'm always open for revision on this. But it does not mean that just your perception is what's real. That's not what it means.
Right.
It means that there's some consensus between different beings of a similar kind, the way they perceive certain things.
Right.
But there's also the thing itself, and it is something, right? So then the first thing to mention is that formless beings, completely formless beings, is not a thing. That's not a thing. That's not a possible thing. Okay, because if you're talking about true formlessness, then it's just not. It's there's nothing that distinguishes it from just the infinite soup, right? If you want to say, well, their form is a lot more diffuse and it's some just energetic flow, okay, but that's still form. Like there's still something there that is
Yeah.
different than just the soup, right? So already let's notice that they have something that is like to be them for them, right? And I do think that the higher dimensional they probably also hold the capability of shapeshift and change their ability. And it's as easy as like changing an avatar. Like
Mhm.
if it is an infinite video game, you can just change the avatar, whatever. The representation as it appears to others doesn't matter as much as the substance of the interaction itself, which is the essence of the being and how it operates and all of that stuff. And I actually think maybe the video game example really can drive the point home.
Yeah.
But ultimately, what you notice is like if I interact with you in some kind of a future virtual reality, even if you come to me in a different avatar, if I know you well enough, I can probably tell it's you if you're not trying to like,
Mhm,
obscure that
mhm.
from me because there's something about the interaction. So to some extent, yes, I would say it makes perfect sense that they would be, other things. But then you have to ask yourself, why would they wear that particular suit
Yeah.
in any particular instance, right?
Yeah.
And to me, actually, that is not so much of a just like a question that really have no way of coming at an answer to. Uh, Function creates particular shapes. So the reason that a quagmire looks circular like this, it has something to do with the dynamics of fluid dynamics in water, but which has to do with water, the surface tension of water, the exact parameters of what the medium is, and the function that is happening creates the circular thing. Well, that means that if you see a particular shape, it implies a function. So you can go the other way around. So I think, for example, with the insectoids, which I'm not in my awareness, the insectoids are the ones that are weaving physical realities. That's their job.
Hmm.
They're like literally making universes, right?
Wow.
And when I thought about it, I was like, why would they? First of all, why would they? They must know that humans are bothered by insects, right? So why would they come to you as that if they can be whatever? This alone tells me that most likely that's actually their base shape if they truly reveal it. But the function to shape ratio there, maybe insectoids, and this is why the reason why insects look that way on also on our level is because maybe that shape, that kind of a thing, is best for hive mind
Hmm.
for some informational
Right.
reason. I don't
Right.
know. And it would stand to reason that if you're going to be weaving physical realities,
Hmm.
error correction has to be on point. So you better be connected to a hive mind that kind of tells you in real time what's going on instead of sending an email, reading. Like individuality should be a lot less
Yeah.
emphasized with these kind of beings, right?
Yeah.
So
So
I
maybe
think that
maybe it's something like the closest thing since they have to appear to us in some form. There's like some sort of sympathetic sort of form on our level that resonates with what they are, which
mhm,
is like not literally an insect, but the closest thing on our level to what they are would be an insect. So that's how they represent.
that's how I would reason about it. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. So you have this extremely realistic entity encounter, and it sounds like you have a number of realistic entity
Oh,
encounters. Are,
every day for a year. I've been on it for a year.
tell me a couple other notable ones because it's just entity
Oh,
encounter stories are just always fun.
yeah, it's so funny. I guess I don't know. I connect to them a lot less for some reason. There's well, the one being that was always appearing is the one that jumps in and out of my body. That one was pretty regular. He had a lot less more of a self definition, but he was, I guess, much more. Um, it's gonna sound bad, but it's not what it sounds like. I don't have a better description, but like the boogeyman.
Hmm.
But he's not like. I can totally see how maybe he can like scare people, but that's not what he's trying to do. He's just very fast, and his delivery is very erratic.
Hmm.
So he's like, and he's very like everywhere, right?
Hmm.
And he has this like confuse you for the joke kind of thing. He's like,
Wow.
look, I run this way, and then I go, and then I come from the other side. That's the fourth spatial dimension. You see, I pull my hand down there, and it comes from here, like stuff like that. Like he's very kind of erratic, but he's not. It's different than the Joker. The Joker is different. The Jokers are also very fast, but they have a lot more of a vanity about them, which is part of their kind of operation, and they seems to be the most revered by others simply because whenever the Joker appears, everybody else stands still. Everybody like just freeze, don't move. And from what I understand, they're the fastest in existence. Nothing is faster than the Jokers. So it can literally just be like they just can do faster than anything else. So nothing can take them. Nothing can do anything about them. They decide. The only thing that, from my awareness, the only thing that is higher than them is the God Almighty. Like
Wow.
there's no, they're like the final level, you know. And for example, with them, because there's one that always kind of visited me. There seems to be this unclearness about their nature. Like, are they yin? Are they yang? Are they dark? Are they light? They don't know either. They're everything. And later, when I was kind of investigating these ideas, I realized that in order for anything to count for creation, something somewhere or someone somewhere has to have a moment of experience of it. Otherwise, it doesn't register.
Yeah.
So somebody has to be
Yeah.
a being that can experience the yin and the yang all at once. But the gift they get in return is that they can literally exist in every level. They're not tethered by any particular world. They can do whatever they want. They basically live a free agent, the Joker, right? But that guy, the boogeyman guy, was always like doing these weird things where he would show me how when he moves, instantiates itself into my body, and he does a particular thing, if I respond, I can manipulate the room physically, or what appears to me, obviously, right? So like I would do this, and the whole room would fold in half, like an accordion. I was like, what? He was like, and he showed me what how he can pull me out of my body, and this was a particularly interesting one for me. So what I saw, so it got to the point where they were talking to me and matching my speed. So usually people go into DMT and it's just like very crazy and erratic. No, they would like wait for me to understand and acknowledge and only then proceed, which was unheard of for me before. And they would say, so one time he goes, okay, he pulled me a little bit out of my body and he went, and it was like, whoa. It was like, you feel that? I'm like, yeah. He's like, okay, now we're going to go all the way out. Okay. I go like, okay. And then he plucked me out of my body, just like, poof. And I'm looking, I don't even know what that means, but I'm looking and I'm seeing a boundary, almost like an energetic boundary, like something you would see in Rick and Morty or something. And then I see the room, the way I see it from my eyes, and then a perfect replica right beyond the boundary. And he's waiting. He's like, do you understand? I go, no. He's like, look again. And I'm looking again, and he's like, and then I realized what happens is there's a perfect replica of the world that you're about to be buffered into. And in that world, when something buffered, that's it. That's it happened. You can't unwrite it. This is it. This is part of the grid. But if you're in this little nook before, it's the pre-buffering. It's like it's simulating the scenario before it gets into the real part. So if something goes,
which is the real? Is it the physical or the
no
beyond?
no no? So so imagine like this. It's all real. Like there's nothing fake. Okay, everything is real. It's just that in the computational space, they reserve themselves the right, a tiny buffer of time, where if things go a little bit too haywire, they can still correct it before it gets into the thing, and then it's like, oh my god, they don't want a disaster. Okay,
yeah.
So to prevent that disaster, you have this little buffering space where if you do something that is like the system didn't catch it on time, or like it was like way outside of what was should have happened, they can correct it real quick, and they correct it between your saccades. So the reason you can't see anything, right? I don't know if you notice this on DMT, but people are very experienced would notice this. You sometimes look, and all of a sudden you will look and look back, and something is not there, or something that just moved really quickly. The reason that you can't see between your eye movements is because they get to rebuffer right between your eye movements, so they can change something just when you moved your eyes, basically. The same principle that magic is based on, that basically that's what they're utilizing, and that's the buffer. And it's almost like the best way to describe it is if you put a really really like highest end iPad right in front of your face like this, and let's say somehow I like make it like bigger, so you don't even know it's a screen, like I'm putting it right here.
Right.
You wake up from a coma and you're just looking at a room, but you're not looking at the room, you're looking at an iPad.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? But it's so perfect that it looks like the room, but only you have two devices. You have an iPad and another iPhone right in front of the camera of the app, so you have like two of them. But that's basically the room there. So that was a really interesting one for me, because it's the first time they ever showed me something technical about how things operate. And then slowly, and I should mention that I never, the funny thing is what people think, you saw the Matrix, this is an idea you have, and you just kind of injected the idea. I couldn't care less about the simulation hypothesis. I found it to be one of the most boring ideas about the world. I thought it was just making things messy. It's not interesting. It's like, okay, now it's just all up for grabs. Who knows why they made the laws of physics the way they did? It's like, it just, from a physics standpoint, it makes things messy and not neat.
Yeah.
Physics is looking for the neat. It's like we want that one explanation that kind of explains everything, right? So slowly they started showing me things. Like one time they showed me like literally like almost like I'm laying down and there's like a thing connected here, and it was real, like very real, very real. And that was the first time I've ever experienced anything on DMT, and I was a little disturbed. Like I came out of it, and the first thing I said, I was recording all of these sessions, and the first thing I said, why would you show me this? Like, wait, first of all, is this just like, are you just toying with me? Like, what? I was so confused, because first, that never even crossed my mind, because I thought they're just in a parallel world of some sort, which makes the most sense, right? But then I never even thought about the simulation theory at all. But when they show me these little hints of like computational layers, so the fact that they even showed me that was confusing to me, because I never thought about it. But at the same time, also like, why would you show me this? Like, it's actually not. It doesn't feel good. Like I don't, because it makes you feel like a puppet, or like and but then slowly, I now understand that what they were doing basically is that they were kind of probing psychologically, gently, like to see what happens if you actually reveal some of this. And then they were telling me things that are just like way beyond the scope of what I could accept at that moment, right? They were like, they would say things like, you already know, and we know, like it's like these like very grand ideas.
Yeah, almost
and
like
actually
koans or something.
Yeah, kind of placing me in a special place, things like this, which is actually when I was like, hold on, because I was like, one second, this is delusions of grandeur. This is schizophrenia 101. This is like but what was interesting is that I didn't feel weird during my like regular hours, because usually with schizophrenics, like they don't even, I spoke to a few that even if they know this is not real, even in real time, they cannot override the not knowing that it's real. Like even that they know, right? And that I wasn't experiencing that, but that gave me a little bit of a pause. I was like, hold on. And then I started looking online, and also I was in the beginning of my 30s, which usually schizophrenia erupts in people who are predisposed to it around that time.
Yep.
So I started looking online, and I actually found that I'm not alone. There's a lot of people talking about it. So that kind of gave me, a little bit more peace of mind. It was a particular case that I always mention because I find it particularly funny. There was a therapist from Florida who this happened to him, and he started talking to aliens every day. And the same thing, he just started doing DMT every day. He just stopped working, and eventually he had to go to a shrink himself. And he told him, okay, you got to stop doing this. You're not talking to aliens, but everything the guy was saying, I was like, okay, there's other people. This is happening. And after this very long period, I kind of started getting the sense that it's kind of going nowhere. I was like, well, okay, you showed me that one thing, but how can I ever prove it? And also, can you show me how to build a spaceship? Like something that I can, bring back to the
Right.
village. It was always esoterica, just like, yeah, let's fold the room. I'm like, great. What do I do with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
So then I said, okay, basically I said, look, I'll be coming to visit. I love it, but I'm kind of done with the doing it every day part because it seems not really going anywhere. But the fact that I knew at this point that this must be real never left me, and I that part was just stuck in my head, and I started thinking about it from first principles, and I said, okay, can we say conclusively somehow that that's real? What would it look like to say something concretely about it? And I thought, okay, I know light is involved because I see it with my eyes. I know that if it's real, it has to have a geometry. It has to have some rules by which it's operating. It has to have a topology because there's a boundary. Clearly, sometimes we see it, sometimes we don't. Even if the space itself is infinite,
Hmm.
we sometimes penetrate the boundary. So we somehow enter the space. So then I asked myself, is there a place where the entry point is the same for everybody? Is there such a place? And that was the guiding principle.
Mm.
So we can agree on it. And after all that thing, I basically actually went also through a big life transformation, which at the time didn't really seem connected to this, but now I'm thinking about it like it had to be connected to this. I basically 4 a.m. couldn't sleep, got up and pulled the bookshelf off the wall, dropped it on the floor, and just kept on packing the house. And the funny thing is, it felt like brushing my teeth. It felt very normal, but I wasn't doing it. Like
Mm.
it was just kind of doing it through me. And I didn't sleep for 3 days, packed my entire house, drove to a landfill in Calabasas. It took me 3 trips with the biggest U-Haul I could find, and I threw away everything I owned,
Wow.
literally everything. And that from that moment on, and by the way, just a fun fact there, I had crazy sciatica that I was prescribed morphine for because it was so bad. And I went to the doctor, they did an MRI. They found that my L5 and L3 are fully herniated, like out. That's it, that's burst. So there's no fixing it, just surgery maybe. And so I had debilitating sciatica for like over a decade. And sometimes it would inflame and blah, blah, blah. And I came back home from this crazy event, throwing everything I had, and I realized I have no more pain.
Wow.
It was gone. It never came back. My discs are still herniated. So at that moment, I knew A, it's all in my head. B, there you go. It's all basically controlled by these like different channels of histories, and we can influence them to some degree. All the stuff that people talk about, right? You create your own reality, all that stuff. But I didn't really have any good ideas of what's going to happen next or what we're supposed to do. And then I just basically, for a good year and a half, I just kind of like couch surfed with friends, didn't really know what I was doing. I mean, obviously, I tried to do a few things. I started doing some production stuff. I shot some music videos because that's what I knew how to do. And actually, doing one of these instances was when I was working on this music video edit. In the middle of the night, I took a break and I went outside. And that's when that story that I'm mentioning in the first video happened, where I got the first hint, which was, by the way, already after that departure from them. That was like 2 years after almost. So it's not like there's not really like there's definitely big gaps
Chunks
in
of
the middle of
time.
the
Yeah.
story. Yeah, it's not like it all happened like once,
Hmm.
consecutively, one after another. But that's and from that moment on, that's already everything that people kind of know, which is like that
Yeah.
hint appeared on the ground. I looked at that paper. I kind of started thinking about it, which took a few more years. And maybe we can just tie the history of this now, so we can talk about the implications and things. Basically, the super fast forward, maybe 3 more years, I met now who is now my wife and the mother of my daughter. Um, and I told her a little bit about this before, but she kind of took it as like, okay, cool story, bro. Like, what do you want me to do with
Yeah.
this, right?
Right.
Um, but there was one day where a set of hints that I already told her about started appearing for both of us in the same time, and she was like, "Whoa!" I was like, "Now you're getting it." And then was together. We sat in like through this like very very crazy labyrinth of hints. We arrived at the idea that somehow lasers are supposed to do something. We didn't even
Mm.
know what it was. And that was basically the birth of that idea officially. And then we tried it and it worked and started
So
talking about it
interesting.
online. Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I'm deeply interested in is, different strains of esoteric thought. And there's so many parts of your story, or really just like the psychonautic experience in general, that make you wonder if you're really peering into, like within like a Hellenic Greek context, they would have called like the nous or something, which is like the realm of mind, like which is from like a Plato's cave perspective, let's say, you appear to be in this physical world, right? Which is in that story, the cave, but there's this whole other unseen realm outside of the cave. And there are other tantalizing clues even within the cave story, because when you pair it with the divided line, which is like, I'm sure you know about this, like there's like this vertical line, it's sort of divided by the golden ratio, and there's this sort of line in the middle where you go into the realm of essentially the mental. Like you
Mm,
go into the realm where you it's beyond physical reality. It's even beyond and then you get even beyond dianoia, like you get beyond logical reasoning, mathematical reasoning, and you get into this realm of what they call noesis, which is like pure beholding of like a truth, or pure beholding of a sort of frame of mind. And they also had this metaphysics where you had this unseen realm of beings, like they called them daimones. This word eventually become like it's all perverted into what we conceive of as demons now. But if you read a lot of these esoteric thinkers, daimones are almost like these um worker entities a lot of the time. They're like maintaining reality. They're like making the blood inside of your body pump. They're making your heart pump. They're making, the idea is that there are these little um consciousnesses everywhere, right? And we of course see these things in folklore rendered as like elf-like or dwarf-like or fairy-like or whatever. But when you hear stories like yours, and then you read or something, for example, like I was just talking about the Mithraic liturgy, which is this do you know about the cult of Mithras?
hold on. It sounds familiar. Let me just look at the picture.
It's I'll give you the boilerplate, but
Sure.
it's just another like interesting analog where there's this whole there was this whole initiatory tradition in the Roman period where their liturgy is preserved within this esoteric text called the Greek magical papyri, and it's this whole cosmic ascent initiation that you somehow did, that there may have been a psychedelic component to. We're going through these like realms of different beings, and a lot of
Mm-hmm.
these beings are like therianthropic, like they look partially human and partially animal, similar to like Greek gods or something. And so again, you have to wonder,
Actually, wasn't
okay,
familiar with this. So
oh
yeah, go
okay,
ahead. Yeah.
um yeah, so again, you have to wonder, okay, is this like a metaphor for like astrological stuff? Is there some esoteric meaning that's not literal, or are they literally accessing realms of consciousness where they really are encountering these beings, and this is not metaphorical at all? And then
Mm-hmm.
once you go down these kinds of rabbit holes where you are literally taking what it feels like taking veils off of reality, and you are encountering other intelligences, and you are you know it, operating in this realm of pure apprehension with your mind of what sounds a lot like what they would call noesis or something. It starts to feel a lot less metaphorical, man. It starts to feel a lot more, no, that's
Yeah.
really what they were doing. And it kind of feels like we may be rediscovering this stuff, and I fully acknowledge that there's danger in thinking this way, right? Like there's
Mm-hmm.
absolute um danger, there's opportunity for psychosis, there's opportunity for fantasy, or what Jung called the mana personality. Like he had this whole idea that once you start exploring your own psyche, and you get beyond the ego, you get beyond um you know your own, what you conceived of as yourself, you can start to have this almost messiah like complex thinking. Oh, I'm special now, I found this special
Mm-hmm.
thing, and these fucking normie idiots don't get it. All of these things,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledge them. And yet, I do think it is directionally quite possible. Quite
Well, no,
possible.
it's exactly what's happening. Only the thing that and the thing that you mentioned with the Messiah complex, it's actually very clear to me what's happening there. So basically, it's this is something I spoke with Gallimore when we sat down in
Mhm.
LA. Um, So the way I see it is that every new reality that is created, it has the ultimate word, the ultimate instantiation of the truth, reverberating everything that is already known, reverberating in the fabric of that existence itself. In our case, space time. So this is, and beings are evolving alongside of it and towards it. And the second they reach the level where they start matching what the knowledge is,
Mm.
they now get to add to it,
Yes.
but not until that moment. So when you, by the fact that you acquired certain level of evolution, intellectually, spiritually, it doesn't matter in what way, you start matching the angle and the intensity of what is already known by the creation. But not everything is known. The reason everything is happening is because there's one thing that is not known by anyone in existence, which is why everything exists. And what is happening is that all of these realities are ran in order to try and answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, when you start reaching this level of awareness of what in fact is going on, then you're all of a sudden, by the fact that you can do these things, you're acquiring tools that gives you the ability to now add to the grid. Now the grid is going to learn something through you, from you, that it didn't know before.
Yeah.
And when that starts happening, you start noticing the pre-recorded messages of urgency, uh, um, transcendence, all of these notes that if you take them to mean stuff about you personally,
Mm-hmm.
you now start suffering from the Messiah complex. So basically, it's like Princess Leia comes in a pre-recorded message, but in this case, she's talking, just generally, right, to whomever finds the message. And existence does that. But if you take it to mean you so like you in the presence of it, you're like, oh, me. That's exactly what happens, and that's how people basically devolve into that. But if you understand that the message is available for everyone,
Yeah.
you literally just need to notice it. Then you realize it's not about you personally, it's about we are doing this all together.
Yeah.
Join. That's basically what the confusion, I think, is happening there.
Yeah. Something you said there really resonated with me because there's this concept that's a huge mind fuck that I was trying to process at some point reading one of the Platonic thinkers. I don't remember if it was Plotinus or who it was, but it was a bit more down the rabbit hole, and it was along these lines of that the highest level of knowing, this noesis frame of mind that's so hard to communicate what exactly they mean by this, but it's a knowing and a being at the same time, and that really felt like
Yes.
what you were
Mm-hmm.
describing. It's like you reach these states of consciousness where it's not just like a knowledge. It's like you
Mm-hmm.
are, I don't want to say vibrating at that level because it sounds so cliche and so like new age, and I don't want to align myself with that with vibrations necessarily, but kind of like that. It's like you there's literally a part of your psyche or soul that is like resonating with a different plane, which is also a plane of mental, right? It's a plane of mental reality that, particularly in idealist context, this makes sense that if reality is essentially like layers of mental realities that eventually culminate in one ultimate layer, or you could view it as one most basic layer of reality, I think. um it would make sense that you're also somehow being at that level and thinking at that level at the same time, and that's something that's really hard to wrap your mind around from this POV, like consensus reality POV. Yet when you're doing it, I think it does make sense.
I actually think it's a lot less of a mystery if we really pay attention, because I don't think it's ever not that. It's
Right.
just that we don't notice it's that.
Yeah, I
So,
would
for
agree.
example, yeah, and this is it's a, you're right. It is to some degree a problem with the way that we learn how to think about the world in the modern world, in which the academic way of seeing it is kind of king, right? But I would say that even intellectuals, the way I define it, and terms are really important here, the way I define knowing or understanding is a state of being. Now, you might think of it in terms of like, well, what do you mean? I calculated this thing and then I understood it. What you don't notice is that when you occupy the state of actual understanding, like deep understanding of something, let's say even in mathematics, something very technical, right? There's deep catharsis there. It's very much in your body. You just don't notice it. But the fact that it feels good, it tells you that it's in the body. It's instantiated as a state in the body, which entails the ability to see clearly even the technical stuff. So when you truly understand something, you don't need to ask things about it or analyze it in roundabouts. You don't need to say things about it. You just see it for what it is. And you can understand it from a very holistic perspective. You can turn it in your head. You can understand the logic of its operations. All of that is what I call knowing. That's actual understanding of something, right? And there's no need to mince words. Like as long as we understand what we're trying to say, that's all that matters. You can swap the words. You can say, some people like to call it, comprehension. Some like to call it knowing. That's fine, but it's not like the word is the thing, right? We're just trying to point to something. What I'm pointing to is that state of full embodiment of what the other thing is. That's what I call understanding, and it is always a state of being. So when you go up the levels, it's just more of that you can occupy within your state of awareness, including in your body, of course. Otherwise, the knowledge is not actually instantiated fully until you feel it. I would say. And so to me, it's much less of a mystery, and it's kind of like, and I do notice that it's an impediment to some degree, because this is where I like to think in holistic terms. So for me, even these separations, and I know that it's obviously not yours, it's like the smartest people to ever lived throughout history, but I do take issue with that, because that actually creates unnecessary separation when it doesn't exist. I'm not even talking about some unified field. I'm just talking about reality. These separations between physical and non-physical, it's all what it is. It's just that we have different perceptions of it, and I always try to think of it like that. And specifically with science, on Saturday I'm giving this talk on IPI lectures, and most of the audience are physicists, which is challenging because I can't, write the equations on the level that they would need to see it, right? But what I can contribute, and I think this idea holds, is that what science really is, the archetype of what capital S science, what science can be unfolding into the universe, right? It is the enterprise of understanding. Full stop. Right now, we only think of science in terms of one modality, which is the things we can probe, measure, spin, momentum. Those are the fundamentals. They're not necessarily fundamental. They are one element of the physical constituents of what we call physical and reality that allows us to manipulate matter in a very impressive way. There's no question about it. But the fact that what executes the function to be able to build these things, understand these things, is still a mind,
right?
And you choose to ignore the mind because you don't know how to put it into the one modality you chose to look at the world through, you are not doing capital S science. You're doing lower S science, and that's fine. But we need to expand and understand that if you define science that way, now meditation is a science. What is science if not looking at something closely, notice regularities, communicating the regularities so others can replicate it? That's what meditation is. It's the science of the internal world. You pay very close attention, and people can achieve very impressive things that you can measure with functional MRI. I don't know if you're familiar with Richie Davidson's studies over 3 decades, with meditators, and there's no question that they have actual abilities that they can do, and you can see it in a brain mapping scan, right? So the second you think about it like that, all this competition between the modalities disappears, and it just becomes the project of humans trying to understand the world. And then you can play with different modalities. Maybe there's a different way to connect all these things, and then all of a sudden that separation disappears. And I think that's where the potential of the humanities right and left hemispheres actually lies, where you can actually come together and have the people that are more just really good at being and people that are really good at thinking, which there's nothing wrong with that. And then you combine these abilities to build something that is new, that never existed before.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, that reminded me of something. I may have heard this from John Vervaeke. I can't remember, but it made so much sense when I heard it. It's essentially, we've gotten ourselves into this weird situation with scientific reductionism where, we invented the ruler. Like, let's say the ruler is science, right? And we take the ruler more seriously than the ontologically superior being that created the ruler, right?
Hmm.
Like, it's like you always require a more ontologically real agent to wield the tool. Yet
Hmm.
we respect the tool more than what created the tool, right? And I know that it's not that simple, and people are, prone to delusion, and there's all kinds of problems with psychology and the human mind. But yet I still think the human mind is the ultimate portal to all this wisdom, and you have to go within the mind. You have to look through the inner telescope, I think, to find the deepest truths. And it seems like all the biggest disruptors in science did that, right? Like Einstein was famous for his Gedanken experiments, his like meditative experiments. Like we already talked about Descartes, his breakthroughs came from literally like angelic figure visions and stuff like that. So yeah, man. And there's so many other stories like that. Like
Yeah, it's
yeah.
Alan Watts with "There's not enough inches." We can't do the.
Yeah.
It's like he compares money to inches when you do construction. So it's like, because dollars is a measurement unit,
Hmm.
not it's not the value itself. It's the how you measure value. So he says, like, you come to a construction site, somebody says, "Here's a plank and it's this many inches," and then he said, "Well, we can't build today because there's not no inches." I was like, "What do you mean? There's no raw materials?" I was like,
Yeah.
"No, there's just no inches. We can't work today." It's like it has the same logic, basically.
Right. Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. So now we're getting into what most people know you for at this point in your story. You get this insight to, hey, let's look at this certain kind of laser under the influence of DMT,
Hmm.
and what happens from there.
I build a laser, just connecting some wires, and then turn it on. Smoke DMT. There's code in the surface. Straight up, like in the Matrix. Looks a little different, operates a little bit differently, but straight up, like just like self-executing code of some sort. I say this to my back then she was my girlfriend. I was like, "Hey, there's code in the wall," and she goes, "I don't understand what you mean." I said, "There's code in the wall." She goes like, "I still don't understand." So okay, well, those are the words in English. I don't know how else to say this. There's literally code writing in the wall right now. And she's like, and I guess maybe if I have to, be more charitable, like obviously the confusion is you're on DMT. All kinds of things happen. Like why does this one stand out?
Hmm.
But it does, because it doesn't have the same kind of evolutionary component to it. Like all hallucinations or scenarios that you experience, they always have like it evolves, something happens, it changes. This thing is just there, sits there, does its own thing, just like you're looking through a microscope into a
Hmm.
whole new world, and it's doing its own thing. You can move your head around it. You can move the laser. It's not moving with the laser, so it's just the laser's literally just revealing different sections of it. So no matter how you twist this, something is there, right? And I'm kind of looking at it, and at first I wasn't sure what to make of it, but like the fact that all of this search culminated in this was very surprising to me. Because to be quite honest, I didn't actually expect it to work. Nothing ever works. There's all these rabbit holes that sometimes these beings that can actually send you down, and it never amounts to anything. This is how people end up writing books about nothing, because they're already married to all these propositions, but there's no fruition there, and then they just, well, now they're stuck with this idea that cannot actually be taken beyond it, so they write a book. But the book, when you end up with the book, is just about nothing. The book was about nothing, right? And so when that worked, I was very surprised just by the fact that it worked. And then I started showing
And
other people.
and when you say it worked, you showed her and she saw it as well, right?
Well, she wasn't smoking back then,
Okay. Okay.
but I started showing other people, and they all started seeing the same thing. At that point, I was like, "What the fuck? Like, what? Like, just take yourself through this. Like, what are the chances that something like this happens to you, right?" And then every single person I started showing, and they're like, "What, bro? This is great. What is this?" And then I even started showing people, and I had one instance where a really good friend of mine, Timmy, he did it, and because he was so deep into the trance, he like went in. He forgot I told him about this whole thing He just snapped back into reality, and he was standing in front of the laser. I guess he was in his head until that moment, and he goes like, "Bro, there's some kind of a language in there." Like he discovered it just now. I was like,
yeah.
"Yeah," and it kept on going, and then at about the 80 people mark, I decided, okay, I have to email someone. So then the first person I think I emailed was Donald Hoffman for the obvious
really?
reasons.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And he was just went through a very serious, I think, heart
Yeah,
surgery or
yeah.
something. And he was kind enough. He replied actually. He said,
Such a
you
nice
know,
guy.
he looks like such a nice guy. And he you know, he said, listen, here's the list of all my PhD students. You can talk to them. I'm recovering right now. But I was like, no, I got to talk to you. I didn't say it to him, obviously, because I wanted
Mhm.
to rest. I wanted to respect his healing. But in my head, I was like, no, 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 no. I need to talk to you. Like, you need to know this. So, you know, moved on. Then I tried to reach out to Gary Nolan.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I got through. I got his assistant, and then, but then again, you know, I didn't even really know how to communicate this. So the first people I went to are the ones that are already kind of like out there thinkers. But even then, of course, because they are saying the things they're saying, they get wacky emails all the time,
Of course.
more
Yeah.
than anyone else. Because
Mhm.
every person who thinks that they have like a theory of whatever, they now think, oh, what I'm saying sounds crazy, what they're saying sounds crazy. They will understand, right? So that's a problem. I even found David Deutsch's account on back then Twitter and sent him a message. He responded. I was really surprised. He's probably one of my favorite thinkers and scientists like that is alive today. And in fact, his two books, The Beginning of Infinity and The Fabric of Reality, were instrumental in me thinking about what eventually led to the laser, which is like the way he describes the double slit experiment and what happens there when quantum computers and how they work and all that stuff. So, and it had to do with the coherence and the fact that you can maybe send one bit between the worlds. And I thought that would be interesting because one of the main ideas was the diffusion of light. And can we send a signal through light? That was the idea, like
Mhm,
somehow,
mhm.
right? So anyways, I tweeted it to him and he was like, hey, like I told him, hey, I think I said, I have strong reasons to believe I discovered something fundamentally new about the world. Would there be any chance to get 10 minutes of your time? And now that I'm more in a position where a lot of people email me, I can only imagine how that comes across. And he's like, he was nice enough. He said, I can't help you. You need to make this more publicly known, and others would be able to help you. That's
Mhm.
what he said. So that's what I did. I just like started putting out videos about it, and slowly people started noticing. I interacted with a bunch of people on Reddit, try to answer as many questions as possible. Started getting invited to events. I did a few events, and then basically, maybe the wheels didn't come off yet, but like there was instances where things started happening. It's going to be too convoluted to explain to you here,
Yeah.
even though it might be interesting. But I can show you later. I recorded things that, bro, like crazy. Like we're talking about glitches on the phone that just clearly not in place in very key moment. Like things that are very bizarre. And then at that point, I started
So like
really.
synchronistic, kind of glitchy in the Matrix
I
type
had
things.
my brand new iPhone, brand new that I got the day before. After something crazy happened, there was like almost like a biblical scale thing that happened to me. And I'm looking at this video. I'm showing the other person who was with me in the room, and I was trying to show him a video of Charles Eisenstein that I recorded
Mm.
a week before, and it was still on my phone. I'm showing him this. After a moment ago, I basically experienced the God Almighty, and I'm putting the phone in front of him, and this brand new iPhone that I just got on 6+ minutes of the video has created this crazy glitch over the phone. And I was like, what? And he grabbed his phone and started recording it. And I started taking like pictures of the thing. And then when it was over, I'm like, you saw this? He's like, yeah. And then we played it again. It was gone. It was
Mhm.
normal again. I look. I'll show you. I'll show you actually what started happening to the phone. And this is just Charles Eisenstein recorded on a video talking, and then this starts happening. And also, because I was scrolling, I wasn't looking for this, but in particular, I was trying to find something else.
Mhm.
And my finger stopped exactly at that bit. I don't know if you'll be able to hear. I'll just play like 30 seconds of this because it's like 6 minutes long. But listen even to the content behind what is happening right now. So to be clear, this is what the video is supposed to look like. Hold on, let me. So this is what the video is supposed to look like. Just Charles talking, okay?
Mm-hmm.
This is what started happening on the video.
About ceremony.
Weird.
And more understanding that the main impact of what I do is not in the semantic content, but it's in...
Yeah, that's very strange.
Because the new story or the new mythology that we're transitioning into has a beingness. You know, it's associated with there's like a consciousness. There's an experience of being.
So this goes on for 6+ minutes and then it just jumps back to normal. I asked a friend of mine who's an MIT guy and he's like super like, you know, real genius, and he like knows all the stuff. And I asked him, hey, Tony, what would cause this? So he said, well, I can tell you what can cause this from a technical standpoint. What would have to be the case for this to be happening is that you would have to hold a very powerful magnet exactly where because what happened was when we played the video again, it was normal, which means the data wasn't corrupted. So he said the only way that this can happen is if you would hold a very powerful magnet that has to be aimed at exactly the part that moves from the hard drive to the reader, the what goes to the screen. That's how you can achieve this. But he said, but why it happened here, I have no idea, bro. Like, this is not a... And I asked another friend of mine who used to work for Apple, and I asked him, when this happens, do you guys know what causes it? And his question to me was, what is this? I said, it's a glitch on my phone, because I just sent him the images. It's like, no, that's not a glitch of an iPhone. That's not happening on an iPhone. That's not a thing. So, like, things like this. So now you combine this with the fact that all of this is happening, and, you know, like all these, you know, weird instances happening to me. And then that, I don't know if you saw, but that console appeared for me. So for me, at that point, I was like, okay, I can't believe this, but this is happening. The virtual augmented reality console that basically appeared for me, that now is appearing for me 100% of the time, every time I smoke DMT.
Have you ever heard of something called the Pauli effect?
Let me look it up. Or you can explain to me.
Yeah. So Wolfgang Pauli, famous quantum
Oh,
physicist.
Wolfgang Pauli. Yes,
yeah.
Okay.
He won a Nobel Prize. Was very close with Jung. He actually worked with Jung on trying to develop the theory of synchronicity, but he had this reputation for showing up places and like causing glitches, like causing equipment to just like break. It would like became a thing that became so normal that they called it the Pauli effect. It's almost like what you're saying almost reminds me of this. It's just like that there being this almost weird air of like novelty and synchronicity or something that started emerging like as this was going on.
And I think what's happening there, by the way, people always say, well, basically every single person who's more scientifically minded,
yeah,
including some scientist friends of mine, all said the same thing. They said, Danny, I love you, but let me tell you this. That part you mentioning with the numbers on the floor and the stuff, remove this from your story. Because I'm listening to you and I'm okay. But the second you say that, I stop listening to you. Like, it's just, I can't, it's too, and I always say the same thing. I can't do that. I'm going to be lying to you if I'm not going to tell you that some of the information came this way.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what the significance of that. Now I have, I think, a better idea, but I cannot remove this from the story because it's the truth about the story. That's how it came about. And I think that if I have to explain it in more technical ways, if the world is a computational world, so you have all these channels, right? And the second that something happens on the layer and the other layers start noticing the interaction of the lower layers, you can basically create a situation where the attention of the being is landing in the right place at the right time. And what you can do is you can accentuate the significance of that for a second. So nothing is allowed to interfere with your free will. It's almost like a law of existence. But what is allowed is to amplify significance a little bit. So I can make an object glow a little bit more for you. Just kind of like in a, like in the old Quest games, you walk in and this thing glows a little. So it glows with meaning. And that is allowed. So sometimes people would say, I listened to the song and all of a sudden I looked and my eyes landed on this thing. Yes, that's how they communicate to you if they really want you to pay attention to it, because it's actually not that hard, because you would scan the thing, and if they wouldn't emphasize it in that way, you would just keep scanning and it would never land. But they made this match happen for you. They just emphasized this one thing and your eyes landed on it. So at that point, if somebody is trying to communicate to you in that way, if they understand how the system works, it's actually not that crazy, to be honest. It's like, if you want to allow for the possibility that these beings are real and they're in higher computational levels, so they can see your level plus some, it's not that hard to imagine how you would just like, I just code a little glow of meaning in that thing, and now you're going to be with it for a second. And I didn't do anything. I didn't tell you what to think. You still have to reach your own conclusions. You still have to reason your way towards it. You still have to evolve to understand it. But if it's time is of the essence, if there's any other components, from what I understand, that part is allowed. Like small emphases of moments and things.
Okay. Did I miss the numbers on the floor part? What was that?
Oh, okay. So I could, yeah. So the first hint, I'll just show you the first hint that ever appeared, because that's kind of like the thing that started this search. I was editing this music video. Yeah, I'll just show you this because it's the same folder. I have a folder for this whole thing. So I was walking down the street. I took a break from editing the music video, go down the street to Ralph's to get a sandwich. I'm walking, and every time I would have my time, I would always think about that stuff. Like, how do we communicate between the worlds, all that stuff. And I noticed that the stoplight that was right in front of me, was the middle of the night, was right next to Pierce College. The street was empty. I'm looking at the stoplight, and the way was, because I had a long walk, the light switched quite a few times in front of me. And then after a few times, I realized, wait a second, the way the light diffuse and with the different colors looks different. The red looks different, the yellow looks different, the green looks different. So if you squint in the middle of the night, you'll notice this. The diffusion on the edges of the light looks different in all three. Now, obviously, I knew that it might have something to do with the way the glass sits. Maybe they even use a different glass for each one of them. I don't know. But the second I thought that, it's almost like something grabbed me and went, yes, look there. Like, very strong. And I was like, okay. And then I started thinking about David Deutsch. And in his first book, The Fabric of Reality, he talks about how the penumbra, like the fact that shadow diffuses this way, actually shows you that there's parallel universes, because if there wouldn't be, light doesn't do that. You would see a clear-cut line. That's actually a quantum effect. And that's because the particles interact with instances of themselves in this higher dimensional space. And he goes into details into exactly how it happens. And then he talks about the double slit experiment. And I don't know if you know, but David Deutsch also wrote the Deutsch equations. So he's I've
heard of it, yeah.
Yeah, so those are the one that made quantum computers possible. So he definitely understands a thing or two about the technical part of it, right? So I was thinking about all of that. And then I go, and all of a sudden I see this thing on the ground. And the first thought I had, right when I looked at the light, I had this realization. I look down and I see these numbers. They look like this, which is just the Department of Water and Power writing some stuff on the floor. What power lines go there and all that stuff. And you see this thing right here? Because I was working on a music video and I couldn't fix a color problem for like hours, this kind of looks like a Premiere dial in the color palette. Like you can slide, right?
Yeah.
So the thought I had was like, wait, wouldn't it be funny if this kind of matches some LUT number that it just fixes my color problem, like one of these? But then I was like, nah, and I just kept on walking, right? On the way back, I was already on the other side of the street, so it actually took some conscious decision to do that. I was like, all right, I just went across the street, I took a picture of this. Go back home, I put it into Spotlight, the numbers. The first number is 081802. Not Google search, just Spotlight on a Mac. And Spotlight on a Mac searches through your computer, and it searches on the web at the same time. Here's the thing. Those are 6 random numbers. If it doesn't find something exactly like that, it would find something adjacent, close to it, right? There was one hit. One. And not on my computer. On the web. I don't know if you can read this. It was
search for Higgs boson pair. It's a little small.
search for Higgs boson pair production in the so basically it's CERN looking for particles outside of the standard model. A paper about that. So just the fact that it was even on the same subject matter, because when I looked at the light, that's what I was thinking about. Higher energies, lower energies, how do we like exactly the subject matter I was thinking about. And then obviously my brain thought editing, but I know it was that moment because I looked down exactly when the light and then the numbers, right? So, and then I was like, what? And then I started reading the paper. To be quite honest, till this day, I don't really know what it just concluded that they couldn't find anything outside the standard model. The higher energies required, all that stuff. But then that kind of stuff started happening all the time. And whenever I would read something like this, there would be a hint in it that sends me to the next thing, that sends me to the next thing. And the next morning, I told this to a friend of mine, and he gave me a look that made me not want to tell this anyone else ever again. Because he basically kind of didn't say anything, but I saw that he thought I was losing it.
Yeah.
And that's actually a very painful feeling because it's not expressed to you directly, but it's like very indirect and it's actually very unpleasant. So I said, okay, I'm not going to say this to anyone else ever again unless I figure something out. So I kept on doing this for years without telling anyone, like whenever something like this would happen, and I just kept on following these steps. Fast forward, whatever it was, 3 years maybe. At that point, I already met my now wife. I told her about all the stuff, and we were in the botanical gardens in Colorado. Oh no, we went to Boulder after, but the botanical gardens in Denver, and we started talking about why plants are green. She knows a lot about plants, and talk about photosynthesis and the fact that they reject greens, the one wavelength they don't use. That's why it's green. Then I was like, well, why are these plants red? Why do they reject red? Why some plants do this, that way? And when we started doing that, the same feeling came back to me, which is this, yes, look there. Oh, and the thing I didn't mention to you is the other thing that started following me years before, even before this happened, was the number 42. So the universe is now without sense of humor. 42, the answer to life, the universe, and everything.
Yeah, and
the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And it's not, to be super clear, I don't think the number 42 actually means something. Well, even though at this point I'm not so sure, maybe it does. Maybe he just was channeling something that he didn't understand. But my best explanation is that they know I love the books. So they know it's a signifier, and it's funny because it's the answer to life, the universe, and everything. So whenever I'm on the right track, they would like signify 42 really strong, right? And it was not. I'm not talking about digital clocks. Like I'm talking, I would be driving, thinking about this stuff, lifting my gaze, and all of a sudden there's a super dirty farmer's truck in front of me, and there's one tiny spot where it's wiped clean and it says 42 with a Sharpie, like things like this. So I told her about this, including the 42, including that I'm talking to aliens, all of that stuff. She didn't leave me, so I knew she's the right one. And then, but that day in Denver, we're walking around. We step outside of the botanical gardens. It was a super hot day. It was like 115 degrees. She crossed the street to go stand under a tree while I'm calling an Uber. She crossed the street. I finish calling the Uber. I cross the street. I come and I hug her. And then I look down and I say, Kelsey, look down.
Yeah.
She was standing on a 42, the same color as the first hint in a different state. They do it in different colors. And at that point, she's like, what? And I'm like, okay. And then she's like, okay, show me. No, she's a researcher. So she's like, okay, show me that first paper you found. And the whole day, it was like this crazy scavenger hunt in Google. And we went to Boulder and we sat in this Thai restaurant. And we're just like sitting, both of us like separately on our own phones and just like Googling like crazy. And I hope I'm not confabulating that part of the story. I truly don't remember exactly if it was the right moment or there was something happened. But I think we looked at each other at the same time and said lasers. We were like, lasers? And so that's, now you look at all of this, right? And you say, okay, well, that you can't possibly call this a methodology, right? But if you allow it for a second, if you think about how scientists actually have the real eureka moments. I know probably know these instances better than most because you talk to a lot of people about this stuff. But these really enormous breakthroughs usually happen not in the lab when they're thinking about it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
They happen when they're in the shower, or they just have this like synchronistic moment of
Yep.
whatever. So yes, you do need to put in the work and like know what's going on.
Yep.
But that instance of like, it happens like that. It happens through these like, and then what happens there? I'm not so sure that we're supposed to be ignoring it. I think that actually there's probably a method here that we're simply ignoring all the time, but it is there. Like if you follow a particular kind of feeling. So the irony is that even though science is in the business of trying to eradicate as much feeling as possible from the picture, the the moment of actual deep understanding and that boom, like wow, actually can only be found when you activate your connection to your feelings, when you can connection to your body. That's I think is actually where the actual meld happens between
Mm-hmm.
what you call the cerebral and the the, the feeling of being alive, basically. I think
Yeah.
that's when they become one.
Yeah, that clicking moment, I think that might be a type of noesis as well, because it's not it's so strange, because it's like there's this weird, if you're working on a problem, let's say, and you're not getting it and you're coming at it from all these different angles, and then you completely disengage, and then something just suddenly solidifies when you've disengaged from active, you know, work on the problem. Like that in and of itself is so strange, right? And is like, it doesn't seem like that's how it should work, but yet it does work that way. And I think too, man, I mean, synchronicity is just one of those things where, again, I think it requires so much nuance, and there's like, you could be so prone to delusion, yet I absolutely think it exists. I absolutely think synchronicity is real, and I've had such brain melting synchronicities that are just way too hard to dismiss or chalk up to mere chance. And I don't know where that line is, and I'm not going to pretend to know where that line is, but
Oh, I'll
yeah.
tell you. It's very simple. Does it amount to anything? That's it. If it just kind of happens and like, and by the way, amount to anything can also be you had a breakthrough in some
Mhm.
emotional thing you were struggling with. It doesn't matter. If it amounts to something, that's all that matters. To my mind, I told this story, the one I told you to Andres was also one of the first people I reached out, by the
Oh,
way.
cool.
And I told this part to him, and he's both open-minded,
Right.
very smart, and obviously understands the statistical game better than most.
Hmm.
So I asked him, like, you don't find it significant? He's like, no, I don't really find it significant. I said, that's interesting, because so now I have to kind of be considerate here, because obviously when you're hearing a story from someone else, the assumption that they confabulated any part of the story or misremembered or
Yep.
injected some fact is very, like, first of all, it's very likely, right? So that's what makes it less significant. But if you actually walk down the steps, it's crazy. Like, why would it be a physics paper? Why would it, like, what would it be a paper? Why would it find something? Why would it
Hmm.
find one thing and nothing else on the internet that I wasn't searching for? I didn't say physics. I just put that, right? So what I'm trying to say here is that the significance of what's going on is always connected to so many data points that can only be encompassed by the person experiencing it in full, that ultimately you can share it, but it will never be as significant to others unless it amounts to something they can also partake in.
Hmm.
By the way, that's why I'm actually not that big on trip reports, because it's like, yeah, I know, like, all you had to say is it was wild. Yeah, I know. I've been there. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But like, but the rest of it is yours. So that's the thing. And I think that ultimately, as we express ourselves to others, what we're really looking for is these moments of connection of, do you also see this? Because that's the thing we want. We want the communion. We want the, what I love about the way that Aaron approaches the movie, the director, is that he's a lot more. I'm a lot more like technical and stuff, and he's very all about the human domain. So what he's looking for is these moments when you turn to the other and say, "Do you see it also?" Because that's the moment of connection to,
Right.
like,
Right.
we're sharing something here. And I
Definitely.
think that ultimately that's where comes to fruition. I don't know if you guys talked about it or not with Wow, why am I spacing on his name now?
Andros?
No, Boehner.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But I had him on my podcast too, and he wrote it in a book as well, which, by the way, I highly recommend. It's a really great book. The Bigger Picture, right?
Yeah.
And he talks about how they all experience these synchronicities right before, during, and after. And when I asked him about it, no, he said no. Like, even with all the stuff that I know about, delusion, all that stuff, no, these things were clearly, something was happening to all of us. Something is opening. There's some kind of a thing that is opening there.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think similarly to what we're talking about, I think that there is inherent meaning in reality, and that, have you seen the Penrose three realms thing? Something like that. Something like there must be this innate realm or plane where reality, logos, whatever you want to call it, exists from, that can't be human generated, right? Because we're learning things about reality. We can reliably, and I'm not even talking about on a woo level, I'm talking about on a normal scientific, mathematical, engineering level. We can use our minds to find pattern, find meaning, and then reuse those same patterns over and over and over again, whether or not they point to a fundamental reality or not. It works. We figured out something about reality we can do over and over again. Now we have computers. Now planes fly. Now, now we can do podcasts, whatever. We know this works. So what is that meaning? Where is it coming from? And I've always thought that synchronicity is some kind of a, if we're going to use that Penrose model where you essentially have the mind, the physical, and then this realm of meaning, it's almost like all three of those realms flash in a simultaneous moment, where it's not just you viewing something or interacting with something here. It's something where meaning is inherently involved. And that inherent meaning is resonating with something right in front of you in a way that seems completely beyond chance, right? And there's so many examples there. I have this famous, for me at least, famous rose synchronicity story that I don't like. There's no way anybody can convince me that was not a significant instance. Jung.
Do you mind sharing it, or
sure, I can. Yeah. I'll try to tell the 1-minute version. So my good friend Colin and I were going to do ayahuasca. This was about 5 years ago. Going to Peru, doing the whole thing, right? Going into the rainforest. So we're both nervous, right? He's flying from Portland. I'm flying from Chicago. He's already on his flight to Lima. I'm supposed to meet him in Lima. Then we're going to go to Iquitos together. So I'm about to board my plane in Chicago. Literally, the plane is boarding. And then they just cancel the flight. This flight is canceled. Find out it's inclement weather at the connecting point. I'm supposed to connect in like Texas and then go to Lima. So I'm just like, oh shit. Because I have a very tight connection into Iquitos and there are not many flights that go in. So I tell him, like, man, my flight got canceled. I don't know what the hell's going on. I'm going to try to get on the next possible flight out. Long story short, I fail. I can't get on a flight that night. I have to fly out the next morning. So I get a random hotel near the airport. I'm super nervous. He's super nervous. He tells me his wife, Sarah, suffers from panic attacks sometimes. So she has these visualizations that she does. One of them is a visualization of roses growing around you. You just try to calm yourself and imagine like roses protecting you. Very random, right? It's like, okay, interesting. So he's nervous. He's telling me he's doing this rose meditation. And he's like, dude, the weirdest fucking thing just happened while I'm doing this rose meditation. And I'm like, okay, what? He starts sending me text messages of a guy who is in front of him. He has roses all over his luggage, rose tattoos, like all like up the side of his head is like shaved, almost like a pro wrestler haircut, where he's got like long hair on one side. He's got roses tattooed up his neck and the side of his head, on his arms, all this. And I have these pictures, by the way. They're in a video that's up somewhere. So he's telling me this, and all the hairs of my body start standing up because the random hotel that I selected, Danny, was called the Rose Hotel. I'm sitting there at the bar at the Rose Hotel looking at a menu that says Rose right on it, and it's this super novel thing of going to do ayahuasca. And it's not just like a random thing. It's not even just happening to me. It's happening to someone else, like that kind of shit. And the rose is
combined.
yeah. And that's such an archetypally important image in and of itself, it's like I still to this day am trying to figure out what that like what the full
What it
meaning of that
meant.
event was, but clearly it was meaningful, right?
Yep. There was I'm trying to see if I can find it quickly. I have one also at the airport that was just crazy. Um yeah, no, so first of all, I love that you're sharing these experiences, but it points to that thing that I'm talking about, which is that unless people have a direct experience of something,
Yeah.
there's not much you can say that will ever make them connect on that level. And I think the simplest version of that is that we always think of like, well, this is just a physical world, you know, blah
Mm-hmm.
blah blah. But like, no, what it means is that that's the one thing we know we all have contact with. So we're always using it as an anchor to communicate with one another. Even if I don't know if the color of the couch is the same for you, I know you can't walk through the couch, and neither can I. So can I. So that's kind of like the thing that binds
Mm-hmm.
us in this space. But everything is like this. You have your intuitions because you already have an interaction with the world, and you wouldn't even be able to develop any science if you wouldn't have first some ability to see the world, to feel the world, to like all of these things are based on your ability to do that first. So I think that when we move into these, what you described, these we're ascending through the levels. I think that what would be required is that more and more people go through these kind of experiences on a regular basis, and I'm meeting more and more and more of them. There's people from the highest echelon to just like wherever, and people are just going through these crazy awakening moments. And after they do, it's almost like they belong to a new family now. They're like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not like this like delusional, mesmerized by some cult leader kind of glimmer in their eyes, but they're just, unless reality itself is the cult leader, right? They're just like, they now belong to this
Yeah.
understanding. They go and they're like, what do you need? Like they're with you. They understand that something is greater than them is happening, and they're part of it, and it's undeniable to them. One conversation that really stood out to me recently was that, I'm sure you saw it with Christoph Koch. You know what I'm talking about.
Was it the Essentia
He did
Foundation
a
one?
bunch. Also the Essentia. Yeah, well, he's the neuroscientist who's
Yeah.
behind, with Giulio Tononi, with integrated information theory.
Yeah.
And if you notice all his interviews in the past, he's very German. He's like very like from Browns and just the facts and all of that. And he's a brilliant scientist.
Mm-hmm.
But watch his face after he had his 5-MeO experience. He's just
Yeah.
like, we're all one.
Yeah.
It's just like a
Yeah.
completely open. He's like a different person,
Yeah.
and you can't put it in a lab, but clearly something is different, right?
Yeah.
You,
Right.
you don't just go from one to the other like this for
Yeah.
no reason at all.
Yeah, man.
And yeah, I mean, so
So
I'm yeah, go ahead.
no, well, I was gonna ask you, like I just want to make sure we get through, the meat of your story and where you think this is all pointing, because we're getting kind of deep in now. But so you're at this point where you've seen what appears to be this code in the laser. Many
Hmm.
other people have seen this code in the laser at this point, and you truly think that this does point to a kind of matrix code, right? And that this is some like hidden informational substrate of reality that points to, I mean, I've heard you use the word simulation. Of course, I personally put a lot of conditions on using that word. It seems like you do too, from what I've heard. But yeah, take it from there.
Yeah, well, I mean, like if you're asking me, do I know what that is? No, I have no idea what that is. The best working assumption we have is, because that's what it appears to do, right? It seems like a self-executing code of some sort. But that's the best you can say about it. And it seems to be some kind of a recognizable language of some sort. I don't think it's anything of ours. The closest thing to which it looks like, it's Japanese or Hebrew or a combination of the two. Some of it definitely, like some letters literally look straight up like Hebrew. Um, but I had a couple of people who speak Japanese that saw it. They said it's definitely not Japanese. Some people see it as Sanskrit,
Yeah.
but to me the specifics of the exact characters don't matter as much as the essence of it, because people can have like variations of how they perceive something, especially when there's so much new information that they're not familiar with. So their brain might actually like collapse it into the closest thing for them, right? But the fact that they're looking at something clearly and they can talk about it, that is not under question. Now, after lengthy conversations with Gallimore and people who are open-minded but at the same time also know a lot about the science itself, if we want to be very fair, Gallimore definitely states that we do know of linguistic representations that we do see in other occasions on psychedelics, and
Right.
he insists that the mapping, if it snaps into position, is perfect. So like you can have hallucinations that map themselves perfectly onto objects, and no matter how you're going to move, it's going to stay exactly how you expect the real object to be there. So okay, that's an important data point. However, I would say that if you do want to ask, if you do want to try and discern whether the space is real or not, then that is just one data point on the way there, but it's the wrong question to ask at the center. The question you want to be asking is at the center is, how do you determine? It's not good to say, well, that's not a good way to determine it. Okay, but how would it be? Then that's the question. What would you need to do to discern one or the other? Because if you're telling me there is no way, well, then that whole part of the investigation is pointless. In fact, then you can just say that the whole investigation of psychedelic research is pointless, right? That's the thing that I think people are missing. One point that I've heard hurled at our project quite often from people from DMTX was how they don't they know of other instances in which this happens, so therefore like it's not a it's not a good discerning factor, while at the same time using the poorest data collection method known to men in DMTX, which is eyewitness accounts. So what they're doing is basically sending people into hyperspace and asking, do they see the same beings, at least in the first round, right? So it's like, even in a court of law, there you go, it's considered to be the worst possible thing you can do, right? You need evidence. So hearsay is the worst, not to talk about you in an altered state, but yet they think it's a fruitful way to proceed. Why is that? Well, because they have direct experience of these spaces, and there's a strong reason for them to believe themselves that it is or it is real, and then they're just trying to see if they can say anything about it. So I actually think that at least with the code, you have something that is replicable to a very large degree, and you can do this basically anywhere, and you don't need to have like crazy doses, and all you need is a laser, right? That's actually way easier to investigate. So I take the points that Gallimore says, but to me, when my wife asked me once, like, why do you? To me, she said she saw the code and she said, I don't know if it tells me we live in a simulation. And I had to think about it, and I said, okay, you're right. I think that for me, it's very salient because of all the other things. Like, obviously, I already have like a very long experience with them and what they were showing me, so I can't really not occupy the state that I'm in. Like, that's it. And also, they showed me directly, so they're like, in one of the instances, they actually showed me like straight up, like they just showed me, yes, we're simulating this space, and yes, it actually does do something to you. There's no question about that. I thought it wouldn't, but it did. It really jarred me.
And to ask you an impossible question before we get too far away from it, who do you think that they is?
In our case, is the insectoids.
Wow.
There are others that weaving other realities. Yes. So they're like, so they all, there's different beings on different levels. The ones responsible for our universe are these insectoids. So they basically make, it's layers upon layers upon layers of simulations that simulating one another, right? And now we're entering the stage where we are kind of beginning to be able to do that too. Before we do, they have to clear us. Because if they can't clear us, so you have to pass all the ethical tests. Because the second you're being handed the magic wand to do that, you become a lot harder to police. Because now you kind of have these like universal powers, and now taking it back is very difficult. So to prevent that from happening, you know what the alignment problem is, right?
Alignment problem.
In AI research, the alignment problem is before AGI actually arises in the machine. If it does, how do you align it with our goals, basically?
Oh, okay.
How do you make sure that it doesn't like kill us all and all of that?
Sure.
Okay, that's the alignment problem. So before they let you go and play, they have to make sure they can align you with the larger goals of existence, basically. Because the second you have these universal abilities, you kind of you get to do kind of whatever you want on that layer, and it can create a mess if you're the wrong kind of being, right? So that's essentially what I'm discerning that is happening, and they cannot stop your evolution. That's not allowed. But what they can do is they can knock you down a peg. So like they can maybe like hamper you a little bit just to give you a little bit more time to develop your wisdom. Because if we have all the bombs and none of the wisdom, we're a problem, right? So knowing that you can be trusted with very large power is really where the main focus is. And I was, after a long time, and after I already started talking about the laser and all of that stuff, I really asked directly at that point, because they would not give me a direct answer. Almost every single thing that I guessed correctly, they just gave me the answer to, but not that. Like if I asked, wait, are we simulated, like directly, they wouldn't answer that. They would just, bye, not enough DMT, things like this. And then one fateful day, they just showed me. They just like, I smoked a bunch of it. They're like, there was a whole thing. They made it into this like very, almost like a parade. And they showed me how they do this. They stripped everything to the grid, and then they showed me how they reconstruct everything. And beyond the shadow of a doubt, they said, yes, that is correct. That's exactly what's going on right now.
It is a simulation.
Oh yeah. Well, by the way, I just want to point something out. This is a simulation no matter what. This is a simulation no matter what. So you can't get out of the fact that it's a simulation. So even if you think that it's just a physical world, right? Your brain is already buffering something that isn't what that is. That's a simulation. Now, obviously, I'm being a little facetious, because what we mean by that is, well, another civilization like in a Matrix simulating us. That is also the case. So now, but the one thing that is different is that it's not like you're in prison. It's not like where they are is the real world, and then you are in a computational world. It's the other way around. The computational world is the real world. What we got used to over here is a tiny subset. It's a slice of this larger reality. And this is why it's a more dumbed down version of it. So when we discovered computation, what we discovered is more universal functions of higher dimensional capabilities. This is why what we can do right now, you and I talking in this way, is so much more sophisticated than anything you could ever do if you were just trying to manipulate physical matter, because computation is a much higher function.
Right.
Yeah. So basically that's what's going on. Like that is the real world. And when you reach a certain level of development, they can't stop you from evolving. That's not allowed. But what they can do is they have a protocol by which they can help you gain enough momentum to jump on their train, right? So basically, if you think about this, in order to build, for example, just with the laser, I'm not even talking about any other scientific breakthrough we had in our last couple of centuries, but in order to build a laser, right, you need to understand a thing or two about quantum mechanics. You can't just build a laser. It's not going to happen by mistake. Okay, so by the second you have a functioning laser, you've signified to reality, I understand something about these universal things.
Right.
In order to distill, in order to freebase something, it doesn't sound complex, but there's a lot of knowledge that brought us to the understanding that there's chemistry, how to do it, acidity of things, pH, blah, blah, blah. All of these things, they're real knowledge, right? So the second you do these two things, freebase DMT, build a laser, even just those two, you told them you're ready to understand something, right? And now what I think is that what we're seeing in the wall is like a breadcrumb. It's because the main pushback, and I'm fully on board with that pushback, by the way, why would it be something we can recognize? Because the assumption is the simulation is a secret. Here's the kicker. It isn't. It's just that, can you understand what's going on? It's not even a test. It's just like a mudfish, or like any creature that like cannot survive in a different environment. They lack the tools to survive in that environment.
Right.
The second they get into a new environment, they have to slowly develop the tools. Well, our tools are cognitive because the majority of everything that exists is cognition, right? So the second we start getting into that level, now they're like, okay, let's leave you a breadcrumb because we need you to really pay attention to this layer of emergence. And what is this? That's the thing that they keep asking me kind of in the background every time I'm looking at the code. They're not so much asking what are the digits saying.
Right.
They're saying,
What
what
is-
is
yeah,
this? What
yeah.
are you looking at right now?
Mhm, mhm.
Answer that question and you will understand a lot. And
Yeah.
then basically that's what I think is going on. That's why what I told you before we went on air, my main attempt now is to try and investigate this from the most physical way possible. Can we perturb a code? Can I create even perturbations to its perception? I don't even care if it's its perception. If I can turn on a switch in some device and both you and I see the same change to the code, you change the world overnight. You don't need to put a million people through it anymore. You just you show that A, something is there, and B, now there's this one way to change it in some way. And then you can start studying it. If it's some kind of a powerful magnet, you turned on at this angle and something happens in the code. Well, I move the magnet by 30 degrees. Does something change? If it does, interesting. Because we know a thing or two about the magnetism, right? So like it responds to magnetism. What does that mean? Now you can start building a Rosetta Stone. That's the aim and the goal of what we're doing in Code of Reality.
Man. Yeah, it's so fascinating. And then figuring out if you could do that, like this would be like the very beginning of computer science, right? Where you just, well, in the case of computer science, it's like you can go back into the extraordinarily boring computer science sort of, IEEE creation of all of the protocols that eventually culminate into this complex multi-layer TCP/IP stack we use to make the internet work. And then you have all these different layers of the quote unquote OSI model, from the hardware to the software and all of that stuff. And as esoteric and magical as that seems, you really can do the hard work of learning that shit. And it's like, yeah, okay, this makes sense. But what's so interesting about this is something that is potentially discovered, right? This is something that is potentially not man-made, but is at least a pointer to something. And I think we agree more than I even thought we would, because it sounds to me like what you're saying is the way that this is manifesting is more like a pointer to something that's real than it is the thing itself.
Well, it's also, you know how it is. It's a fractal. So it's all of those things.
Yes.
In a green system, you don't just give something one function.
Right.
You give it all the functions it can possibly hold on that layer. So it's all of these things. It's both doing something fundamental, I think, and also functions as a signifier. Because if they wanted it to be invisible, they could have just made it wiggles. Why would you need to see it? But they didn't. So that begs the question: why is it recognizable at all? That's the thing there, and it's extremely complex, not in a vague way. One thing I do want to point out here is that you probably know this because you've dealt with this stuff from a technical standpoint, but a lot of people don't know this. Computation is not arising from any law of physics. The fact that computation is possible to do is nowhere to be found in the chain of causation of the laws of physics.
Right.
It's just possible. It's just another law of physics.
Right.
That should be a hint there. That you can compute with the waves of the ocean. It's just going to take forever. But the fact that you can send signals, that any binary of any kind, which is just the difference between one state to another state, and you can create computation.
Yeah.
It's
So and this is why Penrose says the Platonic realm of forms is a logical inevitability. Like he says that, I think, in Shadows of the Mind, because of this, right? Because it's possible. Like it's not you can't find it physically anywhere in reality, yet you can manipulate physical reality with it, and you can organize physical reality with it, which means that meaning and that logos, or whatever you want to call it, is coming from somewhere. And even though our mathematical system is not it, like I don't think our mathematical system is privileged, or like base 10 whatever is really how the universe works, but it's a good enough pointer to something about how the universe works that we can manipulate reality on at least a local level, right? And at least a level that's relevant to us. And I completely agree that probably, you could infer from that we're mirroring something else that exists on a higher level by doing these things on our level.
It absolutely is discovered, yes.
Yeah, and there's probably a way to put like a snorkel or a telescope
Yep.
into that realm. And I mean, you probably know like Michael Levin, for instance, the
Love his work.
biologist. I think
Yeah.
he's doing a version of that too, for sure. And he also calls it like platonic morphospace, like wherever
Mhm.
these beings are like downloading their teleology from or something, so they know
I
what to
think it
grow
is
into.
definitely
Yeah,
Sheldrake's morphic fields, or at least
yeah,
some portions of them,
hmm
for sure. Yeah.
yeah, something like that for sure.
That's what registers the information. Then you have local, then you have universal, global, just like you have long-term memory of a brain and short-term memory of the brain. It's probably the same for the
Yeah.
universe itself. Yeah, absolutely.
So before we start getting into like end wrap up stuff, I do get the sense that there are some pretty important nuances to what you think this simulation is compared to like a Nick Bostrom or simulation. You know, so for people that don't know, Nick Bostrom, he's the guy who sort of started this domino of modern, you know, we live in a simulation riffage that then people like Elon Musk and everybody else picks up on, right? Like his version of it is very simple. You know, we if even if computer simulations essentially just keep getting more and more complex over a long period of time, um, eventually they're going to be indiscernible from reality, and agents within those simulations are going to gain a self-awareness, and therefore blah blah blah. How do you know you're not one of those agents in a simulation already? And like my main issue with that thought experiment is that it makes the assumption that there's something within a digital system that actually has the ability to gain consciousness to begin with. Like I don't believe no matter how complex my computer ever gets that will it become conscious, right? So
Oh, it's
that's what
already conscious to begin with. In like the main difference between idealism and panpsychism, I'm not telling it to you, I'm telling it to
right.
anybody who's not familiar with the difference, is that in panpsychism there is already a world in which there's also a component of consciousness,
Yes.
quantum field, whatever. But in idealism, the world is consciousness.
Right.
That's the big difference there. Yeah.
Yet someone like Kastrup or like Don
Hmm.
Hoffman would not say that you get consciousness emergently from something like a really complex computer system or biology in and of itself, right? It doesn't emerge from that complexity. That complexity is a result of consciousness doing something, like some conscious agent on another plane doing something that gives rise to a Danny or a Michael.
You know, that part is very interesting to me because when one day I will get to talk to Castro, the first thing I'm going to tell him is that I don't think there has ever lived a person that I've ever had the pleasure of watching talking that I align with so perfectly in every single thing they say. Literally, like there's
Mhm.
he's to me he's describing the situation in the best way you can
Yeah.
possibly describe it. Aside from that one thing.
Well, yeah, like
And
he doesn't think AI can become conscious
yeah,
for
I do not
instance, right?
understand this argument, and actually find and this is what I would love to ask him because maybe there's something I'm misunderstanding. But even the example he gives there, to me, is a spurious one. Like the example he gives with the well, if I'm gonna simulate your kidney, does that mean that your computer is gonna pee? To me, I don't even know what he's talking about. Like it's on a different substrate, so the function is on a different substrate. If you would simulate a whole body with the with the bladder and everything else, then yeah, that simulated being would pee. That because you're simulating the full function of what the human body is. But if you're just saying if I'm going to simulate a kidney or whatever, but the computer is on a different plane, is on a different
Yeah.
substrate from that
Mhm.
thing. So that example doesn't run through at all. I have no idea why he's so married to the idea of a substrate. Like I understand the argument of there's something about the pressing against the world, the physical world, that might be giving rise to these signals that we then register as what we experience as consciousness. That I understand, but I see no reason whatsoever to limit ourselves by thinking it has to be substrate dependent. That I actually
Right.
don't understand this argument at all. Maybe you do and you can speak to that,
I
but
we kind of encountered this part of the conversation where I kind of posed the same thing to him in terms of, okay, if everything is conscious, why can't a sufficiently, because okay, I get it, right? We're not saying consciousness is epiphenomenal. Like this is the standard biological argument, right? Like the brain evolved over the course of millions and millions of years, blah 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 blah. It slowly gained all of these capacities until the genie came out of the lamp of the super complex brain, and then we called that consciousness or self-awareness or whatever. Um, there's a lot of different ways to counter that argument. You know, there's like the receiver sort of analogy. There's there's a number of different more top down ways of talking about this than the bottom up ways that are sort of the materialist reductionist ways of looking at it. But one of the ways is that you create a suitable receptacle, essentially, right, for consciousness to instantiate itself. And I did basically ask him that question, like, why couldn't digital silicon and all these other things ever be conscious? And I don't exactly remember what his answer was, but I do know that we talked about it. So you could,
Okay,
you could,
I'll go back
you
and look at it.
absolutely could
Okay.
find it.
Okay.
But you know, someone like Fagin is really interesting to talk to about this in particular, because he comes from the computer science background. He invented the microprocessor, and he
Mhm.
is also convinced that a computer cannot be conscious. But once you start talking about, you know, giving computers quantum abilities and giving them architecture that would be more mind-like, that's where
Mhm.
I start to not be able to understand, like, you know, what the most important nuances are anymore. I don't get it either.
I think it just transforms from different states of consciousness that don't necessarily are created equal. So, like, I think the mistake that we might be making there is that we're assuming that consciousness always have to kind of, at least to some extent, resemble ours. I think maybe that's the
Yeah.
bias that makes everything being lost in translation. I don't know if you ever meditated proper, but in some meditative states, I've had full, like, I'm not there, just the room. Like, I've been there. That clearly is what's going on, right? So the machinery that tells you you're you is kind of the result of the outwards oriented vectors that tell you that has to do with external goals, because there's an external world, which imply that there's something in the middle. It's like an implication thing, right? Every time you say my car, I love, the I-ness is in the implied in your statement about the other. But you can occupy a state in which that machinery is fully relaxed, and you know, Sam Harris talks about it a lot, and I've experienced this. You just have the full diffusion of that, and there's just the room. Yeah, I mean, the body is there, but you understand that there's no. And by the way, it's not like a, the most outstanding thing about that for me was how, the most remarkable thing about it is how unremarkable it is. It's just how it is. It's just very clear that that's what's happening. And so I can totally see how, if you do, if everything is consciousness, like this mic is consciousness
Yeah,
versus conscious, it occupies some state of that without any, just the, I think that agents is the word we might want to be using. So like conscious agents might be different than just consciousness. And maybe that's where the little tweak needs to happen, and then the mistranslation happens maybe.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm on that. That is for me the most important nuance in the conversation anyway, is that if I were to ever be on board with something that's more like a simulation theory, which in some ways I am, it would have to be a consciousness based simulation where
Mm-hmm.
the fundamental substrate, informational substrate, has to be either consciousness, or it would have to be something even pre-consciousness, which I don't think we can talk about, which is why, you know, in a lot of the mystical traditions, you know, like Platonists, Hindus, whatever, you start to get to this place where you only talk about the fundamental mystery in negatives, where it's like, it's not this, it's not that. And in doing this like via negativa, you sort of like create a black hole of an idea around like what this fundamental oneness would be. And I think it's even arguable that in some ways that could be pre-consciousness, but at the same time be the thing that gives rise to consciousness.
Mm.
So it's like this thing, you know, it's the one. In Platonism they call it tohen, the one, all the time. But they talk about it in very logical terms. Like if you ever, you might dig this if you like, you know, a pretty rigorous logical way of looking at this stuff. There's a Platonist named Proclus. He's one of the later Platonists, but he was like a intellectual super genius, but as well as a mystic. Like he was definitely doing daily rituals. He was doing theurgy, so he was doing, which translates to like God working, which is it's a lost method. Like we don't know exactly what he was doing, but they would write about it like it's the greatest, most important pursuit of a wisdom seeker. But anyway, he also wrote an intense amount of stuff. And one of the things he's most well known for is Elements of Theology. And
Mm.
Elements of Theology is basically like this outline of how everything starts from the one and has a portion of the one within it, but it's
Mhm.
also not the one. That's like
Yeah.
sort of the very
Yeah.
first proposition.
That's the key.
And then it
Mhm.
goes from there into like hundreds of other propositions,
Correct.
into like crazy
Correct.
yeah. But
I might be able to reconcile it for you.
hmm,
The simulation is, so it's fundamentally consciousness and or mind, or mentation, mental, as Castrop calls it. The rules by which it operates are computational. That's it. The regularities it exhibits are computational first, and then they collect to other things that look like regular laws of physics and things like this. So the question of the laws of physics still stands, even if you believe the universe is a mind. Because why are these regions of the mind are regular enough to be called the laws of physics? Why can't you walk through the wall if you can just wish anything? You can't. Well, it tells you that there's some limitations to this, right? So the rules by which it operates are computational, which squarely lies within pretty mainstream thought in physics at this point,
right.
by a lot of even Wheeler, it from bit, right? This
Yep.
is not new.
Mhm,
This
mhm.
is the smartest people on the planet thought this way, and that's because that if you ask what is more fundamental, I think the answer must be what can permeate the functionality of what can permeate through more things. That is for sure the more fundamental thing, right?
Hmm.
And if you think about, you can only transmute things in the physical world in so many ways. Computationally, you can simulate anything, including all the laws of physics, plus some. So that tells you that there's a function there that allows for a more fundamental thing. And by the way, even if one of the, I think, most brilliant ideas that David Deutsch brought to the world with his constructor theory is this shift in perspective in physics where you stop thinking about, again, spin, momentum, and all these things as the fundamental thing. You start talking about what transformations are possible or impossible given the laws of physics the way we know them. And now you're opening the window for even emergent properties to become the fundamental thing, even if they emerge later. So even if you believe that minds just arise later in the universe, if you really think about it, if we don't destroy ourselves, which is no guarantees, right? But if we don't, just like everything that was in our minds is now this microphone and the computers and everything,
Yep.
eventually our imagination will paint the galaxy and beyond. So at that point, if you can recapitulate the laws of physics and use them in a targeted way, who's the dominant force in the universe? Knowledge. Which, by the way, is the only thing that we know of in the universe that does not dissipate over time and space. You can send a message from one side of the galaxy if you know how to do it. If you have the proper knowledge of how to do it, you can send a signal. If I have a something on a hard drive, it gives you information, the schematics of this really elaborate large spaceship. Without this knowledge, that exact spaceship is not possible. Okay. Now you send a signal, you send a hard drive from one side of the galaxy to the other side of the galaxy. Because it has the proper knowledge of how to do so, it will arrive at the other side of the galaxy without disturbing anything on the way. So it touched nothing. And now, from the perspective of the universe as a whole, a spaceship will, this physical arrangement that was not possible without this exact piece of knowledge that is in this hard drive, will pop into existence, utilizing the materials around itself, and it touched nothing and it didn't dissipate at all. The knowledge is instantiated and it's eternal. So that thought probably is the most profound thing I've ever heard. That knowledge and we are the kinds of things that can execute knowledge. And by the way, knowledge is not limited to physical things, including just the ability to perceive the world and analyze it and talk about it and instantiate it in our being. That's what the way I perceive it. So to me, the significance of what we are is actually way greater than we thought it was, but not in the way that we thought it was. It wasn't because we were chosen to do something. We are the kind of thing, we're not the only ones, obviously, but we're the kinds of agents that are capable of operating on universal scales. If we're giving ourselves enough time. And one of the things that you asked me what I think the nature of the simulation is, one of them is this alignment problem, because if you if you grow to that level of being able to influence, then reality wants to make sure that what you're animated by is the divine, not the other thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it has to be this like perfect relationship between new and beautiful through whatever you are. And in our case, we're technological. So, kind of combination of those two is something I think a dream worth having for the future of humanity.
Mhm. I like that. And that's honestly a really great thought to end it on. But I do want to ask you one more thing for my own curiosity. So in the way that you see the code in the laser, do you think that there's like a unique code for basically everything in reality, like all the way on up to a person? Like is there a code that is the totality and all of the potentials for Danny, for Michael, or how far up does this code run?
You mean, does it determine everything about you?
See, this is tricky because I know you believe in free will to a degree, as do I, but also I think that
I actually don't, but yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, please explain that more
Yeah.
what you mean by that, and we'll see if we have any commonality there. But um yeah, just go ahead. I think I've given you enough to sort of lob it up
No,
in the
but I
air.
am trying to understand
Yeah.
the nature of the question. When you was talking about the levels of the codes, you asking what levels I believe they operate in? Are you asking if
So
I
for
think
instance,
it's...
when you see the code in the laser,
Yeah.
is the code actually like what is comprising the laser itself?
Oh, see, I see how fundamental it is. So I think it's something pretty fundamental, or at least it's something about pretty fundamental of perception. The reason is that we can't really do anything to it. So with other codes and languages that people see on psychedelics, if they really try, they're pretty malleable. They can change them. They can
Mhm.
change how they move. They can change its content. You you seem to not be able to do that with the code with the laser. Like no matter what you do, it won't change. Like I had people who were very spiritually advanced, and they were very, like, oh, trust me, I'll send it signals, I'll change it. Nothing. They were very surprised. They're like, oh my god, like then nothing happens. It's just there. So something tells me that there's layers to the codes. So yes, there would be codes that are closer to what you are in your mentation and your ability to cognize, and those are the codes I think you can influence because they're closer to what you are. And then there must be codes that are coding for more objective things that you can't change, and thank God for that. Like there's just coding for the laws of physics or coding for whatever it is. And they're at the same time also kind of like the Akashic records. They're both recording and executing the next possible computational steps according to whatever they learned. So it's learning in real time and registering everything in real time. And one of the reasons that I've identified is that it's that ultimate question is still stands. Like the highest civilization can't figure out why everything exists, because why would they? Because you would have to be outside of reality to understand that, right? So they decided to put their entire technological prowess to answer that question. The way they do that is they run these infinite simulations, and they have this ultra mega super AGI that just reads everything, and it tries to create a heat map. It tries to create some kind of a vector space that points somewhere that is outside of what everything is. And that pointer is what's supposed to help produce some kind of a proto answer or proto question, even what is the question, right? Because and it seems that actually what we experience as choice is at the center stage of the story, because you actually, and this is one of these, it just sounds so dismissive of any other point of view, and I don't mean it to I don't want it to sound that way, but there's no other way of saying how strongly this truth claim I'm putting on the table is, or at least the way that I see it, of course, you can't possibly describe a world of any kind in which free will makes sense. That's an incoherent concept. And Bernardo is famous for talking about it too. And I think he's probably the person who did the most to express it in a way that is not inflammatory and doesn't bother people as much. So according to the way Bernardo frames it, is the only thing that is even remotely possible of something like a free choice is the universal consciousness, the universal mind. Because definitely nothing inside of it, right? Because then everything is kind of determined by the moment prior. But no matter how complex, by the way. But even there, if you're talking about the ultimate state of affairs, then the universe, and this is exactly how I think he expresses it, the universe is free to choose that it is ought to choose, because it is what it is. And its freedom depends on this oughtness, on the fact that it is what it is in that moment. And if you want to say, yeah, but, and you're trying to point to something behind, that's where the mindfuck starts happening. You're talking about the full thing. Okay, then there's nothing behind. By definition, you don't get to play that move. You can't say, but what if, about what? There's just it. There's nothing else. There's nothing outside of it. So, or if you postulate something outside of it, well, now that's part of the full thing. So that's the infinite regress that you can't get out of. And just the state of affairs is what it was and could only be and couldn't be anything else. Is it free in that regard? If you want to say it is, but that's not freedom, right? But also, it's the fact that, so from what I understand, what that thing is, it's almost like the hole in the donut, the thing that is outside of even the ability of existence itself to inspect, is that initial choice, wiggle, to exist versus not to exist. And if you look closely at how it's like to be you making a decision about anything, if you parse the time slices thin enough, you will notice that you can see clearly it isn't there. It's more like I always give the example of washing the dishes because it's very, tangible for people. Like you wash the dishes, just imagine the warmth of on your hands, of the water, right? All that stuff. And now you're making a decision between two things. You have 30 minutes to decide. I go to the gym or I go to the store. Okay. You have all these competing ideas. Well, I haven't trained in a week. I feel like I owe it to myself, but also my fridge is empty. What do? I only have time to do one. Okay. As you're washing the dishes, more and more and more ideas that compete with each other are stripped away because you have less time to think about it. So you kind of removing and you kind of leaning in one direction or the other. When you get to the point where you made the choice, if you really look closely, what really happened, you fell asleep for a picosecond and you now woke up in a world in which one of them will happen. But there's no you that sat there on some comfortable couch outside of reality, completely free from all the other things, and said, gym or store. Where is that place? What, is it outside of reality? Where is the freedom in it? It all happened in accordance to exactly what was happening. If I later asked you about why you made the choice, you will retroactively fit a story. You will have a story as to why you think you made the choice. But that's all it is. So it's not like the choice part, the one that actually does that, that's outside. So from what I understand, what they're trying to see is, what is that? That's the kind of like the holy grail. Like, what is that gives that the one that makes the decision that is outside of the purview of existence itself?
Yeah. I'm not sure if I want to end this on a free will debate because it's like in some ways
no,
it's like
please.
the most it's like the most unsolvable and contrived thing. But
give me your best. I'm all ears. Give me your best argument for it.
So I will say that I think I don't have like objections to this memorized exactly, nor do I remember Bernardo's exact argument, but I know that that what you just summarized is essentially his argument. I know Federico disagrees with him. I think Don Hoffman also disagrees with him, but I don't want to construe what I'm about to say as
Sure.
their version of events. But to me, what really matters is, do we as individual beings have enough agency to make our lives better through our actions or lack thereof or not. I don't personally really want to live in a world where that's not the case. And I don't think that this entails that we truly have actual maximal free will, because clearly we don't, right? Like whatever scope of agency we do or don't have is
Mm-hmm.
very locally relevant only. But particularly when it comes to things like breakthroughs, epiphanies, big life choices, I do think those things matter maximally on an individual and local level, like to you, to your
To your
friends, to
I'm sorry I'm interrupting you in the middle, but I want to understand. You mean to your psychology's well-being? So like your psychology's balance? Is that what you mean by
no,
that?
I mean to actual reality. I mean, like let's say Einstein came up with relativity or he didn't. You know, let's say
But these are too blunt. These are too blunt. That's what I mean. These are too blunt. So like when you're saying he did, what I'm trying to point to is that there's an instantiation moment in which it actually happened. And that is not there. So you can say that. So the first thing to say is that I actually don't have a lot of writing on this, so it's not. I don't feel strongly about it.
yeah.
But I do identify is that sometimes where we get lost is in the definitions of it instead of the actual thing that happened. So if you're saying there's a utilitarian thing there, like you said, I don't want to
Well,
live in a
what it
world.
comes down to in this conversation, unfortunately, is a perception thing.
I
Because
agree.
because I can
Yeah,
say I have the experience of making a decision, and then you would
yeah.
say no, you don't actually have that experience. It just kind of unfolds and happens without you ever making the
So
choice.
let me ask you a question about this. Are you open to the proposition? And I'm not saying I'm holding
Hmm.
it,
Hmm.
just in general, not me
Yeah.
versus you, but just in general. Are you open to the proposition that there are people, and maybe you're not, I'm not sure, that are capable of perceiving it more objectively than you, like objectively more correct than you? Are you open to that proposition?
I don't know, because
Okay.
it's so you're asking, are there people who can objectively perceive their own reality better than I can perceive my own reality?
Reality, not just their own. They can perceive reality better than you.
It
The answer
depends what
might be
that
no.
it depends
Yeah,
what
yeah.
that means. I mean, I don't think I'm by any means the most skilled in any particular arena.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
it's not I'm
but
not trying to trump your argument at all. I'm just trying to understand because what you're saying right now is super helpful.
mhm.
You're absolutely right. It rests on people's ability to perceive certain states. And then the question is absolutely an open question. I fully agree with you. Who's perceiving it more correctly, or does it even make sense to talk about more correctly in this sense? I'm with you 100%. The only thing I can say to this, and I think that this is where the fork happens, and it's an uncrossable bridge because it rests
well,
on people's experience. Yeah,
well, let me ask you this: if
sure.
what is the point of an agent that has zero agency?
The agent is a framework that your psychology is utilizing for its stability. That's what I would say. But it's not a real thing. It's not actually there.
Yeah.
And and this is why I asked you if you're open to the proposition that some people might be able to see it better than you, but it's not that they're just talented. Is that they did more work to do so, and you can do too. And all I can say on this, because the rest of it is nothing that you just said is incoherent from a logical standpoint, and you nailed it. It does. The issue is the ability to perceive that state, without which and nobody can ever convince you.
Mhm.
So the only thing I can point to is you're probably familiar with the the example with the snake and the rope in Buddhism. You know what I'm talking about?
Refresh my memory. I'm not
It's a
sure if
short
I
one,
do.
but it drives the point home. You sit in a room, it's a little dim, so lights are not the best. You see a snake in the corner of the room. You freak out. Your internal world reacts to the fact that it's a snake. Then it doesn't move for some time, and you're like, "What?" And then you kind of look closer. You don't want to get too close, but you kind of looking is like, "Wait, oh, I think it's a rope." So then you start going through this proposition war, right? Between is it a snake? Is it a rope? From a certain distance and with lights pretty dim, you can't really discern. It can be both, and depending on which one you think it is, your body reacts to it. So a snake, you freak out; a rope, you relax, right? However, there is a way to get closer turn on the lights, and get enough data as to what it really is. There's a conclusiveness to it. So at a certain point, if you got close enough, you obviously in the example, they go through this whole rigmarole of examples, but like you get closer, you pick up the rope, you hold it, you look at it. That's a rope. Okay. That from that point on, probably a little before, it's a conclusive thing. Even if I turn the lights off again, put it in the corner, you will never go back to thinking it's a snake. It's conclusive. There's enough information about it. So what I'm proposing to you, and I agree with you that unless you have this experience, you will not be convinced, that there is a way to see that your agency is not there with the same level of conclusiveness that you know it's a rope in that example. Like it's for sure. Like not just my perception of it. No, for sure, your agency is actually not there. Then you can say, okay, well, still from a utilitarian perspective, I would feel more balanced. But the fact is, I'm someone who actually finds it beautiful that I can notice that, and it makes me feel more connected to the world, and it doesn't subtract anything about me experiencing when I'm making a choice that leads to something good. You see what I'm saying? So like in the moment of the illusion of it, I can still enjoy that moment without too much resting on it. But I'm going to be the last person to say that I think it's important we tell everyone that that's not, even though I'm convinced of it, I'm not of the mind of like, we have to convince everyone of anything. If it is how it is for you, I'm pretty sure that it's also, there's a function to it. And of course, without a shadow of a doubt, just want to make it super clear, everything can eventually be determined as wrong, including everything I just said, of course. But as far as I can tell, with all my experiences and the quite a bit of work that I've done with like getting into these meditative states, and I'm not alone in this. This is voiced by every person who does this usually. It seems that there's this conclusive way of doing it. But again, I'm fully aware that if I just say that and leave it there, it just sounds like I'm saying, well, I tried harder, I noticed more, therefore my argument sticks. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying I see what you're saying, and I think you nailed it. Unless somebody has that experience directly, nothing can be said about it. I agree with that.
Two things I'll say, then I'll let you have
Sure.
the final thought, and then we can wrap it up. One, I think on a fundamental level, I agree sort of with what you and Kastrup are proposing, where I think whatever the true reality is, like I probably am something close to a monist, where I believe there's kind of one fundamental true thing, and that most of what we see as the phenomenal world is a kind of illusion, or like what the Hindus would call Leela, or like a play, or a Maya. It's sort of, it's not the fundamental reality. It's some kind of a drama that's unfolding on a less fundamental level. Where I get hung up is that we live in such a messy, imperfect world where there's so many things happening that I have a very difficult time believing that any of those things ought to be happening, even in like a logical sense, where it's somehow determined through an agency that is planned on some kind of a higher level. Like there's this notion that the Platonists talk about of like an errant cause. And so I'm going to really resist the temptation to start going into Timaeus and stuff, because this is a whole deeper rabbit hole. But in their whole explanation of the cosmos being created, what a human is essentially is like a subdivision of the world soul, and that world soul is actually broken off from the same properties as the demiurge. So in a sense, we are kind of like the reality constructing consciousness in a lower purity, basically. So in a Platonic sense, we absolutely have free will, but we have less of it, and we have less hyparxis, as they would say, than these things that are like higher concentrations of the same quality. And that's kind of the boat that I'm in, is that we are these agents with a limited scope of effect that are competing against this errant thing that is inherent within physical reality, that by virtue of what it is, it has to form, follow a teleological path, and then break down and like degrade and cease to exist. But then of course these like mental structures either last longer or are immortal depending on what it is that we're talking about. And I've already gone like deeper down this rabbit hole than I plan to go down in this conversation.
No, I enjoyed this.
But
So
I think but I think I fundamentally agree with the idea that everything that's going on within this, whatever you want to call it, the simulation, the world soul, the cave, it is not fundamentally real either way. Like whether we have free will within the scope of that simulation, I still don't think that's fundamental free will, but I still think on a local level, on a world soul or simulation level, each agent is probably trying to work something out, and there are decisions it could or couldn't make that alter the trajectory of whatever that agent is doing or becoming or working through. And I'm not providing any evidence other than this is how I feel when what seems to make the most sense to me. But I've already said more than I planned on what I was going to say.
I agree with this. I actually agree with everything you said.
Okay.
I think we're just using words differently. That's all.
Okay.
But I think I agree with the sentiment of what you're saying exactly. And you tell me if it's not what you were saying. What I saw is that what agents are, they're a machinery constructed around this thing that is a mystery even to the highest order of beings. So in the middle of you, there's a function that operates, which is the thing that is actually making the choice. It isn't you, but it is not even reality itself. You are a portal to a function that is coming outside of reality itself. And in this case, Castro will have a very strong disagreement with me, which I would understand, because he would say, well, then that's part of reality. I agree with that, but that's the mindfuck. Something is there that is pre-reality. And that is what? So in that sense, yes, you embody at the core of you and existence itself. There's something that operates, that brings about things in every moment of, there's a creation happening in every single instance. All I'm saying, and again, I don't have a lot of writing on this, that from a truth statement point of view, that isn't you. In fact, there isn't you, but that's already a separate conversation. But it is the only thing that is free, because it is the only thing that is untethered and yet gives rise to every new moment. That thing that Alan once talks about, like reality starts all over again right now, right? Like, and the buffering, the moment out of which everything emanates. So I actually don't disagree with anything you said. And just to maybe extend an olive branch, even on the level of like what we believe we have or don't have, or what we believe we are, actually matters tremendously. I couldn't agree more. I think that the thing that humans think of themselves determined almost fully where we end up. The one thing I am in the habit of pointing out to people is that this whole, it's almost like we exported self-loathing from the personal to the collective. So we get to say, I came to terms with myself. We say all the spiritual things. We say, like I forgive myself. Da, 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 da. And a sentence later, like talking about all the ills of the world and how terrible humans are. I was like, well, you kicked it up a buck. Now you're criticizing us collectively. We have to stop doing that too. Just like we forgave ourselves, we have to forgive ourselves. And then we get to play the role of the ones that are actually the protectors of this place. We can't do that as long as we think the most negative things about ourselves, because we don't believe we can. Only the really beautiful transcendent beings can do that. So we must start believing that about ourselves in order for that to happen. So I'm in full agreement there. And the last thing I would say, I am actually of the mind that where it is now, that short book, Wherever You Go, There You Are? That's where reality is for me. I actually think that these ideas of Maya, they do a lot less work to inform us of what matters, literally. Because if you stub your toe in the middle of the night and it hurts like a motherfucker, I don't think you would care that I would tell you that, oh, this is an illusion.
Right. Exactly.
It hurts.
Right.
Okay? That's real. So the fact that maybe one day it will all be mended, and okay, but somebody somewhere experienced it right now. and it wasn't pleasant or it was pleasant. To me, reality is, well, sounds super trite, but the now. Like, the closer you can get to this, that's what reality is. And to say that form is an illusion, to me, doesn't make as much sense, because to me, that's part of the operation of whatever's happening. Fundamental, not fundamental, these are concepts
Right.
for you. You experience what, in fact, is in front of you. So I think you're right. There's very strong reasons to care about what kind of story we're constructing around ourselves. And it's not, and I also agree that it's not just for us. I actually think that literally the fate of our region of the universe, or maybe the universe, would depend on what kind of vision we have of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Last thing I'll ask: have you, by chance, read Fajine's Irreducible?
I have the book. I started. I don't know why I kind of slid off of it. I'm having a hard time understanding what is new about his ideas. So as far as I can tell, I've heard him talk quite a bit.
Okay, so you kind of know.
Yeah, it's not new though. Like it's
I
almost
would
like
say,
repackage. Yeah,
I just to put a bow
sure,
on this convo, and we can continue this off the
sure.
recording. I would say that I kind of gravitate more toward his vision of what a self is, and the field and the satiety, like a field within fields, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I think that's more like where I come from than the Kastrup view. But
Can you give me, because I he says quite a bit. So
yes,
what specifically about his argument that you like, the central thing you connected
so
with?
when you were talking about this notion of there's something coming from a deeper reality than you that
Mm-hmm.
actually isn't you.
Mm-hmm.
um for Kastrup, that's like the one, right? Like that's like the one fundamental reality that is, you know, masquerading as all things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a difference of degree, I think, where Federico calls this thing a satiety, where he
Mm.
argues that what you really are is this field that exists in the quantum realm. And that's where your consciousness is, that's where qualia are. And then you as a physical being are sort of like a projection of this field of consciousness, and
Okay.
it interacts with your brain, like maybe through microtubules or whatever, but through some kind of a quantum process, probably that thing is projecting itself into our domain as Danny. But what Danny really is behind the physical mask is this field of consciousness. And
How
he
is this
call
different than Bernardo's idea? It sounds the same.
because we are all have unique fields, basically.
Oh,
And
but
there is a greater field that would be that I believe he also talks about, that is like causative to individual fields. But you for and I mean, one of the cash value of what I'm trying to get at is he would definitely say that you have free will on that scope. He would say that like this satiety that you are is actively actually doing something by coming into coming into the physical plane as Danny or Michael or whatever, and that's actively representing a certain state that that field is in at that point in time, and that thing will continue to exist. It existed long before you existed as Danny. It will continue to exist after you're Danny, and it
mhm.
will probably continue like reincarnating or instantiating or whatever over a long period of time. Um,
Yeah, so that image does make sense to me. It's just that the free will part still doesn't come along into the picture. But I mean, we this is
yeah,
funny
yeah,
because it's, yeah, it ultimately comes down to like, does it make sense to you? It doesn't make sense to
yeah.
you. The point that Bernardo makes here to me is the most salient, which is that there's these attempts to project it into something further and further and more complex, to say it's this, it's enormous, it's this, and it has that. But if you do allow yourself to go to the, ask yourself technically, how does it have it? You'll see that there's no good answer. Definitely not by Virginia. Like
Mhm.
there's no actual answer there. And then you want to say, well, maybe we're thinking about the question, like the emphasis we give, the importance of the question is different. And I'm totally cool with that, by the way. Like that I'm cool with. But if we are, maybe it's my my spectrum, I don't know. But if you are asking the question, can you point to me at the mechanism that is doing that? I would submit to you no one can describe it because it's not possible. That's my only claim. But then everything else about the larger structures and how they operate with one another, I don't see a difference between what Bernardo is saying and what he's saying. It's just that there's different levels of emergence. What Fajin is describing there, to me, is just he goes into more technicalities of how he thinks these things operate within themselves. But ultimately, it's all this one mind that subdivides itself to smaller bubbles, and within these bubbles, you have smaller bubbles, and within totally on board with this. Like, there's no, there's no issue with it. I just don't see it as new.
I think the only difference is there an agent that can make decisions within the smaller bubbles that is like emergent off of this larger thing, or is it really all just the one larger thing that has exclusive ability?
It's not even that larger. Here's tell me if this does any work, because I'm genuinely like, I one day I want to crack a bridge between the two camps. Tell me if this do any work for your inner workings. The main difference that I identify between the more Western ways of doing things and the Eastern ways of doing things is that in the Western way, there's always some form of a one. In religious aspect, you have the one Lord, right? And in modern spiritual thinking, there's just the one unified field. In this Eastern traditions, there's no one.
Well, it's Brahma.
There's not even there's not even that one. There's no one. There's just this, and this is why in some Buddhist sects they say there's no one here that all this is happening.
Well, in Buddhism particularly, yes.
Yeah, Buddhism in particular.
Yes,
you're right. But I would say that that's where the difference in perspective for me is. But I am tempted to say that now, the more I maybe just, the more you mature as a person, to me, that becomes more and more clear that ultimately this is exhilarating, right? It's fun to get into the little weaves of the thing. But ultimately, the wisdom, I think, is kind of step back and ask, okay, what is this for? Right? What is it actually doing? It's almost like the difference between going to university and now having to live life, because in university you learn tools, but when you have to actually live life, it's different. You have to really solve problems nobody told you about, and the tools just become a means to an end, and they're no longer the main thing to ace. And to me, that's always the question. In the Buddhist thing, I would say I see the answer. What is it for? It creates a more balanced life. More harmony between people and inside of people. In the Western way, I guess you can say thinking about things in this way or another can create the world that we live in. But that's the central question for me, because it's fun to do, but ultimately, what is it? What does that do that is different than another way of thinking about it? What can you achieve by thinking this way that you couldn't achieve if thinking about in some other way? That would be the central question for me. Because ultimately, I think that what's happening here is that people are really, what they're really talking about is styles of presentation. There's certain people that other people just don't vibe with. They just don't like that style. It's not that they don't even care about the proposition so much. They like when somebody making noises in that way.
Right.
That's what I think is where the main, and then the rest of it is kind of debatable. It's sometimes people like the more clicky people, and they want things to be like super like, this is this and this is that, and other people want flow and and that. Like, it's a very different presentation. The Charles Eisenstein is very different than someone like Sam Harris.
Yeah,
but but they're not necessarily saying something very different. So would you agree with that? Does that
which part exactly?
The part that it's more about style of presentation than the truth claim of it? Or do you think that the truth claim of it actually,
I mean, to
really
me, the truth claim of it really matters.
To me, that's true. But what's interesting there is that I identify in you. I don't know you well enough yet, but I've watched you. Obviously, you have a big podcast, and I've watched you before. And I now that I spoke to you for however long we were talking, I'm identifying in you a very similar machinery at the core of you that I identify in myself, which is like, we really care about what's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, we are aware that there's a lot of different points of view, and somehow there's translation between the two. But what I find interesting in this particular instance is that I can't even imagine the route that would be taken to arrive at thinking that free will makes sense. And I am in full awareness that you feel the same about the opposite proposition. So what I'm fascinated by is this instance, not the disagreement of it, but what causes the rift of perception.
Yeah.
I really want to learn how to travel that, and I don't know if we can, solve it now, but it would be interesting to explore. That would be a beautiful thing to bridge.
Yeah, we can do that in future conversations.
Absolutely.
Either on or off the record, maybe.
Sure.
But yeah, maybe it's a matter of like getting into. I don't know. Well, let's end this here.
I mean, I can go on forever. Aside from the fact that I have to go make sure the baby's
no,
okay.
I know. Yeah, and I'm moving in like a week and a half, and I have so much shit to do. So I should wrap it up. But this has been really fun, man. It's been
an absolute pleasure, man.
A great convo, and yeah, I agree. I think in a lot of ways we're kindred spirits in our approach, in our a lot of things for sure. More things than we aren't. That's for sure, man.
And we can do it, like I said, if you, at some point, and I'm sure at some point you will, after you see the code, we can do another one in which it will be interesting to see what do you think.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I do need to try the experiment. All right, brother, let's wrap it up. Hang out with me.
Of course.